After my CEO wife went bankrupt, everyone thought I would grab the cash and run for the hills, simply because I was the most notorious card-carrying playboy in our social circle, blessed with devastating good looks, but only madly in love with cold, hard cash. Every day, my sole occupation was taking my CEO wife's money to eat, drink, and party like there was no tomorrow. But in their wildest dreams, nobody expected that not only did I not run away, but I was wholeheartedly determined to stick by my wife and help her make a glorious comeback. I was even willing to move out of our massive mansion with her and relocate back to a run-down Roach Motel slum to live the tough life. However, even my wife herself found this incredibly hard to believe. She actually thought my body had been snatched by some wandering ghost. It worried her sick. I even overheard her secretly praying for me behind my back. "Whoever you are, I beg you please for the love of God never get off my husband's body." I was utterly speechless. "Gee, thanks honey." The shrill ringtone of my phone pierced the air, hammering into my hungover skull like a literal sledgehammer. I furrowed my brows, rolled over, and blindly felt around for my phone. With my eyes still glued shut, I jabbed the answer button. My temples throbbed painfully with every heartbeat. "Mr. Caspian, the limited edition custom watch you ordered last month has arrived at our boutique. May I ask when it would be convenient for you to come by?" "Talk to me at noon," I interrupted her with a hoarse, sandpaper-like voice. Having zero patience to hear the rest, I hung up the phone directly and buried my face back into the goose-down pillows. This was the third phone call this morning. The first two. One was from a haute couture boutique, hounding me to pick out fabrics. The other was the dealership reminding me it was time to pay the final balance on my car. They never got tired of bothering me, and I was too lazy to entertain them. Sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing my entire figure in a bright glowing silhouette. A few empty wine bottles lay lazily on the nightstand. Draped over the sofa was a Chanel women's coat, red, left behind by that little internet influencer from last night. What was her name again? I tried hard to jog my memory, then gave up. Whatever, it wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. About 3 hours later, I finally staggered out of bed to wash up. Walking into the walk-in closet, my fingers casually glided across 2 entire racks of high-end custom suits. Brioni Tom Ford Zegna. I picked out a deep navy blue Brioni suit, paired it with that Patek Philippe Nautilus watch. That was the birthday gift Serafina had given me last year. Limited edition. Closing in on $1 million, she was always exceptionally generous with her wallet. CEO Thorne said this set suits you the best. The butler Barnaby knocked on the door, walking in with a cup of hangover relief tea in his hands. I let out a low, cold chuckle, took the tea, and downed it in one gulp. 3 years of marriage. In this house, I was never the master. I was more like a piece of property under her name, a highly presentable decorative vase. Serafina Thorne never cared how I spent money or who I mingled with, on the condition that I didn't embarrass her or ruin her face. Whenever she needed me, I would put on a nice suit and stand right by her side, cooperating with her to smile, exchange pleasantries, and play the role of the madly in love couple, like a flawlessly scripted stage partner. But this was fine too. Freedom. Zero exhaustion. It wasn't like I genuinely wanted her love anyway. I had money to burn, liquor to drink, women to keep me company, and countless friends circling around me like flies. I asked, today's itinerary? A noon reservation at Maison La Maloise. At 3 p.m., test driving the new car. At 7 p.m., all right, enough, stop reading. I waved my hand dismissively. I didn't need to memorize these things. Anyway, someone would always magically appear to remind me when it was time. At noon, I sat down at Maison La Maloise, a window seat. The sunlight was just right. The 2 influencer models I met last night had arrived ages ago, one wearing a spaghetti strap top, the other in a mini skirt. Heavy makeup, with perfume so sweet it was sickening. Young Master Caspian, I heard your wife is the CEO of the Thorne Group. That is so incredibly amazing, one of them said, acting all coquettish while playing with her phone. Her fingers, painted with cherry red nail polish, were still drawing circles on my wrist. I raised an eyebrow, smiled, and asked, "What's this? Running a background check on me?" "I'm just curious, that's all," she whined, leaning in even closer. "Someone as handsome as young Master Caspian must be super popular, right?" I didn't reply. Instead, I just raised my hand to summon the waiter and ordered another bottle of 5-figure red wine. The moment that black card slid out of my wallet, I caught a glimpse of that unhideable glitter in their eyes. "Mr. Caspian, this card is all ready." The waiter lowered his voice to remind me. I raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" "The limit seems to have." "Just swipe the damn thing," I interrupted impatiently. "Put it on the Thorne Group's tab." The moment those words left my mouth, several folks in business suits at the other end of the restaurant shot glances my way. Their whispers weren't exactly subtle. "Serafina Thorne's kept boy toy. Spends money like water. I really don't know what CEO Thorne sees in him." I pretended to go deaf, and instead deliberately raised my volume. "Want to go shopping later?" I heard Hermes just got a new batch of bags. The 2 influencers smiled even sweeter, their perfume clinging to me like sticky syrup. I leaned back lazily in my chair, my heart echoing with nothing but a hollow void. The sound of swiping cards, the clinking of wine glasses, and those invisible judging stares. Later, I found out, at that exact same time on the 38th floor of the Thorne Group's headquarters, Serafina was being completely blindsided by a phone call. Apex Bank has frozen the Series B loan. They said there's a problem with the collateral valuation. She pressed the intercom, calling all top executives into the conference room within 15 minutes. I wasn't there. I could only rely on the fragmented words I heard the next day to piece together her icy calmness and extreme tension from that night. At 10 o'clock that night, I hummed a little tune as I walked home. Pushing the door open, I saw the living room lights were still on. Serafina was home unusually early, sitting on the sofa facing her laptop, with a thick stack of documents spread out on the table. Home so early today? I tossed my car keys onto the entryway table and plopped down right next to her, my body still reeking of the mixed scent of alcohol and cheap perfume. She didn't look up. Her fingertips typed steadily on the keyboard, and she said, "The company ran into a bit of a problem." I let out a yawn and asked, "How big of a problem could it be? Let's talk about it tomorrow. Have a drink?" I just grabbed a bottle from a buddy, Caspian. She closed the laptop, looked up at me and said, "The company might be going bankrupt." My smile froze. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. Capital chain ruptured. Banks calling in their loans. Suppliers staging a run on us. The worst case scenario, we might lose absolutely everything. Those 4 words, lose absolutely everything, felt like ice water poured right down the back of my neck. My brain buzzed with a loud hum. Luxury cars, designer watches, black cards, glamorous banquets, whatever I wanted picked from the display windows, those things I treated like the air I breathed, might all vanish in a puff of smoke. She misunderstood my silence. Patting my hand, she said, "Don't worry, I will handle it. Just giving you a heads up in advance so you can mentally prepare yourself." I nodded mechanically, squeezing out a smile as I said, "Of course! You're so amazing, you'll definitely solve it." The night grew deep. She finally couldn't hold on anymore and fell asleep. I stood alone on the balcony, smoking one cigarette after another. My phone screen lit up. That little influencer I just added tonight sent several voice messages inviting me out. I stared at the screen, smoke swirling in circles around my fingertips. For the first time, I seriously asked myself, if she really couldn't hold the fort anymore, what the heck should I do? I was woken up by the vibrating sound of my phone. It felt like it was glued to my temple, buzzing non-stop. I frowned, rolled over, and reached out to grab it. The screen was blindingly bright. Over a dozen unread messages, 7 missed calls. This sort of thing was my daily routine. But today's content was totally different from the usual "Are you awake, handsome?" or "You were such a beast last night." Young Master Caspian, is the financial news true? Is the Thorn Group really finished? Darling, heard your wife went bust. Need any help? Hey Casp, still coming to the club tonight? Heard your black card got frozen solid. I stared at these messages, feeling like needles were being jammed straight into my brain. I sat up abruptly, but as soon as I rose, the dizziness of the hangover slammed into me like a brick. I ignored all that and clicked open the financial headlines. A massive boulder seemingly smashed right into my chest. Thorn Group's capital chain rupture crisis. Former business empire faces total collapse. That photo was taken yesterday when Serafina was mobbed by the media. Her face was pale, but her expression remained as composed as ever. I swiped down with my finger. The entire article was littered with words I used to laugh off. Banks withdrawing loans, suppliers cutting off goods, stocks price plummeting 60%. But right now, they made my stomach tie into tight knots. Fudge! I cursed under my breath, slamming the phone onto the bed. I grabbed the mineral water by the nightstand and chugged a few mouthfuls. Only then did I notice the other side of the bed was empty. There wasn't even a dent. It looked like nobody had ever laid on it. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. A moment later, she walked out. Serafina Thorn, the CEO of the Thorn Group. My wife in name. She was already fully dressed. Her suit jacket was so crisp that every crease looked like it was measured with a ruler. Yet, under her eyes hung shockingly dark circles. "You're awake," her voice was raspy and restrained. "Saw the news." I opened my mouth, but couldn't find the words for a moment. Married to her for 3 years, I had never seen her this exhausted. She was always flawless, calmly self-possessed. Even if we were tangled up in bed a minute prior, the next minute she could throw on a coat and go negotiate a multi-million-dollar contract. But right now she was just exhausted. Completely, utterly exhausted. "How bad is it?" I asked. She walked into the walk-in closet, pulled out a dark blue silk scarf from a drawer and tied it around her neck. Only then did I notice a tiny bruise on her collarbone. I didn't even know when she got hurt. "Very bad," she answered briefly, "but still under control. I have to meet a few investors today. I might come back very late." I blurted out, "Need me to go with you?" The moment the words left my mouth, I wanted to slap myself. Since when did I ever interfere with her career? I hadn't even memorized which floor her office was on. She never let me get involved anyway. Saying something like this at a time like this felt so hypocritical I wanted to roll my own eyes. Her hand paused. She turned to look at me. In that gaze, I couldn't read if it was indifference, disappointment, or sheer bewilderment. She merely said flatly, "No need. Get some good rest." My throat tightened, but I couldn't say a single word. Her phone rang. She answered the call, her tone remaining calm and razor-sharp. After a few sentences exchanged, she ended the call, grabbed her bag, and walked out of the room. I heard the sound of her giving instructions to the butler outside the door, muffled like a gust of wind from far away, giving me an inexplicable chill. Then came the ding of the elevator, followed immediately by dead silence. I leaned against the headboard, picked up my phone again, and scrolled through those messages one by one. All sorts of friends were like sharks smelling blood in the water, swarming in rapidly. I hesitated for a moment and replied to a few of my most familiar flames with vague, non-committal answers. Situation's complicated. We'll chat another day. Media blowing it out of proportion. Don't worry. We'll talk tonight. Then I dialed a familiar number, speaking with a frivolous, breezy tone. Mrs. Sterling. It's me, Caspian. Free for lunch at noon? Just the two of us. At 12:30 p.m., I was sitting in a private room of an old money French restaurant on the Bund. Sitting across from me was Mrs. Sterling, the widow of some real estate tycoon, worth over $1 billion. She was, before I met Serafina, my most stable sugar mama. Today she wore a champagne-colored silk suit. Her skin was immaculately maintained. Bright red lips. The Bulgari ring on her hand sparkled under the sunlight. Oh, little Caspian, you haven't contacted me in ages. Her hand covered mine. Her nail polish was still her signature bright red. I heard you got married. And to the female CEO of the Thorn Group, no less. I fought down the urge to snatch my hand back and forced a gentle smile. Maggie, marriage, you know. It's just a piece of paper. You know how it is. I've always kept you in my heart. She giggled loudly. Laugh lines bunching up at the corners of her eyes. Still such a sweet talker. Spit it out. Why did you look for me today? I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. The Thorn Group ran into a tiny bit of trouble recently. I figured since you have such a wide network, Maggie, maybe you could introduce a few investors to me? She raised an eyebrow. From what I hear, it's not exactly a tiny bit of trouble, is it? The whole business circle is talking. They're saying Serafina Thorn probably won't bounce back from this one. The smile on my face froze for half a second. I didn't expect word to spread this fast and this wide. Little Caspian, she suddenly dropped her smile, her tone turning soft like she was coaxing a toddler. You know I've always doted on you. If you're short on pocket money, Big Sister can help you out. But investing in the Thorn Group, that is a literal bottomless pit. A wave of irritation washed over me. I held back from flipping the table. You misunderstood, Maggie. I understand. She patted my hand, her gaze full of profound implications. If you ever figure things out, come find me anytime. But, she chuckled, slowly adding that final sentence, wearing the hat of Serafina's husband, that's not gonna work. I practically fled in defeat. Over the next few hours, I met up with two more old buddies. One was in jewelry, the other was a hidden whale in the real estate circle. I tried to cash in some favors to see if there was any chance to pull in some collaboration. The results were universally identical. Favors can be called in, money can be given. But investing in the Thorn Group? Impossibles. What was even more ironic was that they even asked me straight to my face when I planned to revert to single status. By dusk, I was sitting alone in an old bar downtown. There were already 3 empty glasses in front of me. The bartender wisely kept his mouth shut and topped me off with a 4th glass of whiskey. I downed half of it in one gulp. My stomach felt like a bonfire had been lit inside it. Hey there, young Caspian. Drinking alone, I see. I looked up, a voice so familiar it made my teeth ache. It was someone who absolutely shouldn't be here right now. Silas Vane's excessively well-maintained face. He was as glamorous and shiny as always. In his 50s, hair combed back without a single strand out of place. Immaculate suit. The Patek Philippe on his wrist was twice as expensive as mine. I forced myself to perk up and mumbled a greeting. What a coincidence. He sat down next to me, smiling and shaking his head. I came specifically looking for you. I was slightly bewildered. Looking for me? I heard the Thorn Group has run into a little trouble lately, he said, as he gently swirled his glass. The ice cubes clinking against the glass made a crisp sound. I am very interested in your predicament. His words sobered me up by half. Are you wanting to invest? Silas Vane smiled faintly, but his tone carried an added layer of absolute certainty. More than just investing. I can take over the Thorn Group's debts completely. I can also inject capital and restructure, letting CEO Thorn remain as the CEO. Of course, the prerequisite is that the decision-making power belongs to me. I frowned and said, she'll never agree to those terms. That's why I need you to step up and persuade her. He slid a napkin over to me. Written on the napkin was an astronomical number. If you help me negotiate this deal, once it's done, this money is yours. I stared at that number. My heartbeat accelerated out of control. This sum of money was enough for me to do absolutely nothing and live like a king for years, even without Serafina Thorn. But I still asked the question I had been holding back for a long time. Why? Why are you so interested in the Thorn Group? His smile didn't waver. He only said, just business. Thorn Group has good foundations. It was just a strategic error. I can see its value. What value could he possibly see? I always felt something was off, but my brain was marinated in alcohol, its gears grinding poorly. In the end, I vaguely agreed that I would try talking to her. Then, I stumbled out of the bar. It was late into the night when I got home. The house was dead silent. Only a sliver of light leaked from the study. I pushed the door open and saw Serafina asleep, slumped over the desk. Spread out in front of her was a massive pile of documents. The laptop was still glowing. Traces of exhaustion lingered at the corners of her eyes. I originally wanted to wake her up, but when my eyes landed on the photo at the corner of the desk, my movements froze completely. It was our wedding photo. She wore the simplest wedding dress that day, smiling brighter than any time I had ever seen. I stood beside her, in a sharp suit, handsome and dashing, looking exactly like the picture-perfect husband of Mrs. Vance. Next to the photo lay a document. I picked it up and looked. It was a liquidation list of her personal assets. Jewelry, real estate, even the antiques her mother left behind, all stamped with the words sold. I knew what those antiques meant to her. They were the only mementos her mother left her. She never let anyone touch them. Even when we moved, she packed them herself with her own hands. Now, she actually sold them? Serafina let out a soft hum in her sleep. Only then did I notice her eyelashes were wet. I stood frozen on the spot. My chest felt like it had been whacked by some blunt instrument. What the hell had I been doing all day? My head was full of ways to bail out, which escape route was safer, which sugar mama was willing to take over my tab, while she was using her most precious possessions, desperately trying to prop up the luxurious life I was so accustomed to. I gently placed that list back exactly where it was. I didn't wake her. I just went to the bedroom, grabbed a blanket, and quietly draped it over her shoulders. After returning to my own room, I lay on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. My mind was filled with that number Silas Vane had scribbled down, and Serafina's smile in that photo. I suddenly felt a wave of nausea towards myself. Unlocking my phone, I opened WeChat and deleted all those contacts in my address book who only ever showed up in the dead of night. Then I sent Silas Vane a text. I can't help you with this. The moment I hit the send button, I felt an inexplicable sense of relief. I didn't know if the Thorn Group could still hold on. I didn't know if tomorrow there would be more news tearing us apart. But I had finally made a choice. A decision that even I hadn't seen coming. I'm staying. I will face this hurricane alongside Serafina Thorn. The moment the court seals were slapped onto the front gates of the mansion, that was when I truly realized. The word bankruptcy wasn't just an abstract noun popping up in financial news. It was a literal hammer dropping right onto your skull. I stood at the doorway, watching several bailiffs inside the living room rummaging through cabinets and taking inventory, as if we, the homeowners, didn't even exist. One of them, a middle-aged bailiff with a face full of fleshy rolls and greasy skin, even waved his hand to shoo me toward the door. "Stand back! Don't obstruct official business!" I swallowed my rising anger. My eyes landed on the Aston Martin parked in the garage. "Are you towing that one too?" I raised my voice, pointing at my favorite limited edition ride. "I'm the one who drives that. It's registered under Serafina Thorn's name. It gets seized." He shot back without even lifting his head. "But that was my birthday, Caspian." Serafina softly cut me off, grabbing my wrist. Her voice was so low it was almost blown away by the wind. "Let it go. Let them take it." I turned my head to look at her and suddenly lost all the courage to argue. She looked utterly exhausted, frighteningly pale. A heavy dark shadow hung under her eyes. Her lips were dry and cracked. She looked like someone who was about to be completely crushed by life. She was dressed remarkably simple today too. A white dress shirt, black slacks. Even the minimal jewelry she usually wore was gone. I knew. Those things had been converted to cash days ago to plug the gaping financial holes. I wanted to say something, like, "Are you okay?" But I couldn't bring myself to say those words right now. Neither of us was okay. I couldn't even comfort myself. How the hell was I supposed to comfort her? The sports car was driven away. The roar of the engine sounded like it was ruthlessly mocking me. Watching its taillights fade into the distance, I felt a powerless sense of losing every shred of my dignity. "Caspian," she spoke up again. "Go pack your personal belongings. We have to move out tonight." "Move where?" She paused for a second before saying, "Back in college, I bought a tiny apartment in the old district. It's not under the company's name." I was stunned. In our 3 years of marriage, I had never once heard her mention this. Turns out, she always had a backup plan. Married for 3 years. And I suddenly realized I actually didn't know her at all. 2 hours later, I stood at the elevator lobby, dragging 2 suitcases. Inside was everything of value I could salvage. Some clothes, a few watches, and some personal items. I hid those limited edition watches very well. She didn't see them, and I didn't plan on telling her either. She only brought one small suitcase, looked even lighter than mine. "Let's go." She pressed the elevator button. Her tone was flat. Right as the doors were about to close, I saw the butler, Barnaby, standing at the door. His eyes held a complex emotion, like he had a million words to say, but couldn't spit out a single one. I didn't even know if I should open my mouth to say goodbye. That old district apartment she mentioned was seriously old. The stairwell reeked of cooking grease mixed with mildew. Stepping on that yellowed carpet in my leather shoes, I felt uncomfortable all over. No elevator. We climbed up to the 5th floor in one breath. I almost couldn't catch mine. "This is it." She pulled out a key and unlocked that peeling, mottled green iron door. The moment I stepped inside, I completely froze. This place was way too small, right? 1 bedroom, 1 living room. Not even 50 square meters in total. The lighting in the living room was garbage. The wallpaper was yellowing. There was even a massive water stain in the corner. Without thinking, I blurted out, "Is this place even fit for humans?" Her movements paused, but she didn't lose her temper. She merely said flatly, "Beats sleeping on the streets." I chucked my suitcases into the corner and parked my butt on the sofa. As a result, the springs of this busted couch stabbed right into my back. I furrowed my brows in pain. Annoyed, I loosened my tie and couldn't help but shoot a question at her. "What's the plan now?" Serafina had already flipped open her laptop. Her fingertips were flying across the keyboard, looking as calm as if absolutely nothing had happened. "I'm contacting a few investors," she said calmly. "There's a new project." I cut her off, my voice raising a few octaves. "The company just went bankrupt, and you're thinking about a project? We barely have a place to live." She looked up at me, her tone devoid of any waves. "Exactly because of that. We need to get back on our feet as soon as possible. I've already had the lawyers start handling the bankruptcy proceedings, but we need a source of income. I leaped off the sofa, pacing back and forth in this sub-50 square meter living room, like a wild beast trapped in a cage. Source of income? I fired back with a cold sneer. I don't even have a car anymore. Do you know how those people out there look at me? They're all just waiting to see me become a laughingstock. The myth of Caspian Vance being fed by his wife has shattered. They're probably dying to film a video and push it to the trending charts. She didn't answer immediately. Only when I was almost too angry to speak did she finally look up and stare at me. Her gaze was as cold as a knife. She said, "So that's all the more reason you should prove them wrong." Prove them wrong? I felt like I just heard a joke. You think everyone can be like you? Cold as ice, working without an ounce of emotion? You think everyone can just go bankrupt and simultaneously pitch projects? You're not even human, are you? You're a machine. She closed her laptop, shut her eyes, took a deep breath. I haven't lost everything, she said slowly. I still have my network, my experience, my credibility. These are the true wealth, not those cars and houses. I couldn't stand listening to it anymore. With a cold sneer, I spat out a sentence. Sounds really pretty. Do you know what people outside say about you? They say you're just a pretty vase who built her fortune riding her daddy's coattails. And now, your true colors are finally showing. The second that sentence left my mouth, I regretted it. All the blood instantly drained from her face. She stared at me without blinking, like she had just taken a heavy physical blow. Subconsciously, she tightened her fingers on the edge of the table. I saw her knuckles turn white. Her entire body grew as stiff as stone. I forgot. The year her dad died, she cried for 3 straight days. She even fainted once. That was the first time, and the only time, I ever saw her completely break down. I'm sorry, I didn't. My throat tightened, trying to salvage it. But she was already standing up, grabbing her coat from the back of the chair. Her movements crisp and sharp. I'm going out for some fresh air. Her voice was unbearably hoarse. Yet she still fought to maintain her composure. Calm yourself down. The sound of the door closing wasn't loud, but it felt like a slap right across my face. I grabbed the glass cup on the coffee table. My hand was already raised midair, but at the very last second I stopped. This was a cheap glass set from the supermarket that cost $10. If I actually smashed it, I'd have to be the one to pay for it. I slowly put the cup down, slumping dejectedly onto the sofa, using both hands to fiercely cover my face. I didn't know how things ended up like this. A week ago, I was still the Thorne family's son-in-law, the winner in life that everyone in my friend circle envied, driving limited edition sports cars, wearing haute couture, sweeping a limitless black card. And now, I'm sitting in this moldy, rundown shack, hesitating for 3 seconds even to smash a cheap cup. My phone rang again. A message from the club manager, young Master Caspian. Heard you're down on your luck. Wanna come grab a drink? My treat. I stared at that line of text. A bitter taste filled my mouth. The schadenfreude in that tone was glaringly obvious. Furious, I powered off my phone and tossed it to the other end of the couch. I knew they were all waiting to see if I'd swallow my pride and go back to beg for help, waiting to see if I'd crawl back on my knees to accept their charity. The sky had gone completely dark. Serafina still hadn't returned. I couldn't sit still any longer. I turned my phone back on. The screen was flooded with unread messages and missed calls, all asking about the bankruptcy. Frustrated, I swiped away all the notifications and finally dialed her number. No answer. I grabbed my jacket and bolted out the door, without even changing my shoes properly. A gust of night wind hit my face, carrying a chill and a trace of panic I couldn't quite explain. I didn't know where she went. I didn't know if I could even find her, but I knew I couldn't keep sitting on that moldy sofa, pretending nothing happened. The streets of the old district were terribly narrow. Tattered signboards, dim yellow streetlights, the sound of neighbors arguing upstairs. It was like a completely different world from the high-end communities I was used to. I didn't belong here. At least that's what I used to think. Turning a corner, I saw a familiar silhouette sitting quietly in the window of a cafe up ahead. She was as focused as ever. A pile of documents spread out in front of her laptop screen. The light hitting her face made her look a bit haggard, yet exceptionally resolute. In that moment, I suddenly felt a little afraid to go in. Just as I was hesitating, a shrill female voice rang out from behind me. Well, if it isn't young Master Caspian. I turned around and saw Trixie Bell. She was dressed as tackily as ever, a tight dress wrapping her exaggerated figure, caked in heavy makeup. Grinning like an NPC in a murder mystery game, she was linking arms with a middle-aged man in a suit. Her eyes screamed, "I'm here for the drama." She giggled so hard she was shaking. "I heard your wife went bankrupt. How pitiful. From a high society son-in-law to a penniless beggar. How does it taste?" I gritted my teeth. My fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. "None of your damn business." "Oh my, don't be so aggressive." She leaned against the man like a spineless jellyfish. "Mr. Higgins, this is that Caspian Vance I told you about. Serafina Thorne's kept boy toy. Now that his sugar mountain collapsed, who knows who he's going to rely on for his next meal." That Mr. Higgins narrowed his eyes and sized me up, his tone dripping with disdain. "Looks decent enough. Too bad he's just an empty vessel." I was burning with rage inside, but I didn't move. I suddenly realized, separated from Serafina Thorne, in their eyes I was absolutely nothing, an expired plaything, a piece of trash fallen from grace. No car, no house, no Mrs. Thorne. I wasn't even worthy of being considered human. I didn't want to give them another second of my attention. Muttering a low, "Get out of the way," I shoved past them and walked into the cafe. She looked up and saw me, clearly stunned for a moment. Her lips moved. "Why are you here?" I sat down opposite her. My throat felt tight. I said, "I'm sorry." She was silent for a few seconds, closing her laptop. "I'm at fault too. I shouldn't have dragged you into this kind of life. It's not your fault." I shook my head. My voice was low. "I was too immature. I just ran into Trixie." "Your model girlfriend?" Her tone was as casual as discussing the weather. I nodded awkwardly. She mocked me. "I realized besides you, I actually have absolutely nothing." Something flickered in her eyes, but she quickly tucked it away. "Caspian, our situation right now is very bad. If you want to live a different life, I understand." "What different life are you talking about?" "Divorce." She looked at me, her gaze so calm it bordered on cruel. "You can take the remaining assets and start over. With your looks, finding a woman willing to keep you shouldn't be hard." I was instantly stunned. "Divorce?" She actually said the word divorce. I knew our lives weren't easy right now, but I never, ever thought about leaving. Even in my most pathetic moments, I only thought, once she gets through this, we can go back to our old lives. "I don't want a divorce," I heard myself say, my voice surprisingly firm. "When I married you, I swore an oath in the church. For richer or poorer." Her lips twitched slightly. "That was 3 years ago. In the church, even your vows were written by the officiant." I was at a loss for words, but I didn't want to just give up. I reached out and grabbed her hand. "But I'm serious right now, Serafina. Give me a chance. Let me prove I'm not just some clown." She gently pulled her hand back, gathering her documents. "Non-committal," she said. "Let's go back for now. There are a lot of things to do tomorrow." We walked out of the cafe side by side. The night breeze blew gently, blowing away some of the frustration in my heart. Just as I was about to say something, I suddenly noticed a black Mercedes parked across the street. The window was rolled halfway down. A faint silhouette inside was staring at us. But just as I tried to look closer, the car silently started up and disappeared around the corner. "What's wrong?" she asked. I stared in the direction the car left for a few seconds and shook my head. Nothing. Early the next morning, I was woken up by the doorbell. The sound was rapid, piercing, smashing into my brain over and over. Dazed, I threw on a jacket and opened the door barefoot. The next second, the sound of camera shutters washed over me like a tidal wave. "Mr. Caspian, may I ask how your marital relationship is after the Thorn Group's bankruptcy? Rumor has it you're preparing for a divorce. Is it true? What are your next plans?" 2 reporter-looking guys were blocking the doorway, shoving microphones and cameras directly into my face, snapping wildly, completely ignoring the fact that I had just woken up and my hair was a bird's nest. I was stunned for half a second before I realized what was happening. Out of the corner of my eye towards the kitchen, Serafina was already awake, currently brewing coffee. She was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, her hair casually tied back with a scrunchie, a stark contrast to the capable Ice Queen CEO Thorn in the office. In that moment, she looked just like an ordinary quiet woman. "Get the hell out!" I roared, shoving the reporters. "This is my house, private property." But they weren't scared at all. In fact, they doubled down. "Mr. Caspian, I heard the sports car registered under your name was seized. Any thoughts on that?" "CEO Thorn. Mr. Silas Vane stated he is willing to acquire Thorn Group. Will you consider it?" I froze. "Silas Vane?" In that split second, Serafina's head jerked up, her gaze looking like it could freeze the air itself. "Silas Vane?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough. The reporters were like sharks smelling blood, so excited they were practically lunging forward. "Yes, Mr. Vane publicly announced this morning that he's willing to completely take over Thorn Group's debts. But the prerequisite is that you step down from management. Will you agree?" I saw the knuckles of her hand gripping the coffee mug turn white. Her whole body was rigidly tense. My brain ran hot. I took a step forward, blocking her behind me, and growled, "No comment!" I grabbed her hand and shielded her as we bolted out the door. She didn't struggle. Instead, she gripped my fingers tightly in return. The reporters chased us all the way. We stumbled and hailed a taxi. The moment the door slammed shut, I finally let out a sigh of relief. "Where to?" the driver asked. Serafina gave an address, then whispered to me, "Thank you." Just 2 words. But they left me stunned. This was the first time she had ever said thank you to me. I swallowed hard, my throat a bit dry. "That Silas Vane's guy. Don't ask." Her voice was low, but filled with stubborn defiance. "Not right now." I nodded, sensibly keeping my mouth shut. Looking down at my phone, it was already blowing up with vibrating notifications. Thorn bankrupt couple spotted, Caspian protects wife, Serafina fallen from grace. I clicked into the photo trending on the charts. It was a snapshot someone took the moment we charged out of the reporter mob. In the photo, I was shielding Serafina with my life, my expression dark yet filled with resolve, and she was looking up at me, a look of surprise on her face. I never imagined I'd make the trending charts for protecting my wife. "What are you looking at so intensely?" Serafina asked. I handed the phone over. "We've gone viral." She glanced at it and said flatly, "At least this photo isn't half bad." I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I've had in days. In this moment, I suddenly felt that losing those cars, houses, and black cards might not be a bad thing. Maybe I finally had a chance to get to know myself again. No longer the idle, deadbeat husband of Serafina Thorn, but a man who could, in crucial moments, stand in front of her and hold her hand. The taxi weaved through the blocks, heading towards downtown. Sunlight streamed through the windows, spilling onto our shoulders, sitting side by side. Warm, like the start of a brand new journey. Raindrops battered the windows. The sound was dense and oppressive. I stood in this cramped, dimly lit kitchen, staring blankly at the pot bubbling away on the stove. This was my third attempt at making porridge. The first 2 times, I either burned it or added too much water, turning it into rice soup. Now this pot was about to boil over too, and I couldn't even hold the ladle comfortably. The steam rising from the pot lid blurred my vision. The aroma of rice spread through this shabby little kitchen. Surprisingly, it felt a bit warm. Outside, a flash of lightning tore through the sky, illuminating the kitchen in a ghastly white. I checked my watch. 10:30. Serafina still wasn't back. Ever since we moved into this place, she had worked until late into the night almost every single day. I knew she didn't want me to see her struggling. My phone vibrated. I pulled it out instinctively. An unknown text popped onto the screen. "How is CEO Thorne doing lately? Heard she suffered a mental breakdown." I couldn't even be bothered to give it a second glance. This was already the 5th one today. Ever since the Thorne Group's bankruptcy was exposed, all sorts of ghosts and goblins had crawled out of the woodwork, like vultures smelling rotten meat, waiting to watch us become a joke. The porridge was sticking to the bottom of the pot. I frantically turned off the stove, almost burning my hand on the steam. I smiled bitterly. 3 months ago, I was sitting in a 5-star hotel presidential suite, mocking people for popping champagne too slowly, and now, I couldn't even boil a pot of porridge properly. Just as my mind was wandering, the door lock clicked. I quickly dropped the ladle and hurried towards the entryway. She was back. She was completely soaked, like she had just been fished out of a river. Her long hair plastered to her face, her shirt clinging to her bony shoulders. Her pale lips had an unnatural, sickly purplish tint. "How did you end up like this? Did you walk back in the rain? Didn't you take a cab?" I asked, while taking her dripping briefcase and shrugging off my own jacket to drape over her. She shook her head, her voice so hoarse I could barely hear her. "Saving money, walked back from the bus stop." The next second, her legs gave out. Her entire body collapsed forward. I reflexively caught her, her forehead pressed against my shoulder. A scorching heat instantly burned right through my clothes and into my heart. "You have a fever." As soon as the words left my mouth, she still struggled and said, "I'm fine. I still have a proposal to revise. Don't move." My tone was sterner than it had ever been. I pushed her directly down onto the sofa to sit. I rummaged through every single drawer. Finally, in a small medical kit, I found a mercury thermometer. She didn't resist, just obediently held the thermometer in her mouth. Her gaze unfocused. Her eyelashes, wet with condensation, clung to her under eyes. She looked so incredibly fragile. 5 minutes later, I held the thermometer up to the light. 39.5 degrees Fahrenheit. I sucked in a sharp breath of cold air and couldn't help but let out a curse word. "Holy fudge, are you out of your mind? Burning up like this and you're still thinking about work?" She closed her eyes. Her voice as soft as a mosquito. "Tomorrow, have to meet an investor. Meet my foot." I was genuinely panicking now, my tone so heavy even I surprised myself. She shook her head, saying it as if she was used to it. "No hospitals, just some medicine is fine. I used to get like this all the time." I was suddenly struck dumb. Used to? I abruptly realized 3 years of marriage and I had never once seen her get sick. I had absolutely no idea how she survived these things in the past. I compromised. Turning around, I dug out a set of my own t-shirt and sweatpants from the closet, crouched down, at least change out of the wet clothes. "Can you do it yourself?" She nodded, took the clothes, and swayed unsteadily toward the bathroom. I followed her, unable to rest easy, but the moment I turned around, I heard a muffled thud. "Serafina!" I rushed in and saw her kneeling on the floor, her clothes only half on, her forehead resting against the cold tiles. I immediately lunged forward to help her up. She was completely limp, her consciousness already fading. The things that happened after that, I can barely remember. All I remember is wrapping her up and charging into the rain, carrying her on my back downstairs, hailing cabs for 10 minutes with nobody willing to stop, finally stuffing 2 crumpled $100 bills at a driver, who then braved the storm to rush us to the hospital. The lights in the ER were blinding. The doctor said it was a high fever caused by a severe cold, needed an IV drip and observation. He also mentioned signs of stomach bleeding, likely caused by a long-term irregular diet. She needs solid rest for a week. No more working. The doctor's tone was dead serious. I nodded, my eyes never leaving her face for a second. She fell asleep, her face burning red, her eyelashes trembling slightly. An IV needle stuck into the back of her hand, so frail it made my heart ache. At 3 a.m., I rented a folding cot to keep watch over her, but I couldn't sleep a wink. The smell of the hospital, footsteps in the corridor, and the moans of patients. I'd never felt the world could be this cold. I rolled over, looking at her peaceful face. For the first time, I noticed a tiny mole at the corner of her right eye. It used to be completely hidden by makeup. She wore no lipstick. Her lips were dry and peeling. She looked so overwhelmed by life's burdens. I gently held her hand, cold, slender. This hand had signed multi-million-dollar contracts, propped up the Thorne Group, and now it didn't even have the strength to hold a glass of water. "What exactly have you been through?" I said with a hoarse voice, my eyes suddenly feeling hot. Dawn broke. She woke up. She opened her eyes, scanned the room once, and finally her gaze landed on my face. In that instant, my heart beat faster than the night she had the fever. "Caspian." I immediately sat up. "You're awake. How do you feel?" I pressed the back of my hand against her forehead. Gunned down a lot. Want some water? She nodded. Her hands were still trembling a bit. I quickly supported the bottom of the cup and carefully fed her a few sips. The doctor said you can't work anymore. Must rest for a week. The moment she heard this, she frowned. No, I have to meet CEO Caldwell tomorrow. I'll cancel it for you. I cut her off. Stop pushing yourself. You are more important than anything else. She was stunned, looking at me as if seeing me for the very first time. You've changed, she whispered. I smiled. Bitterness hidden in my eyes. Bankruptcy changes a man. Not because of that. She gently shook her head, leaning against the pillows, her voice still weak. The day before yesterday, I got the cafe bill. You paid off our tab from that day. Why? I froze for a second. I didn't expect her to know about that. After leaving the cafe that day, I had actually walked quite far away. But somehow, my feet just circled back. I pulled out the last few bills of cash I had and paid for that round of coffee. In the past, I never cared about small change like that. I just swiped her black card anyway. But that day, I suddenly felt I couldn't keep taking advantage of her so self-righteously. She was tired enough. I shouldn't make her pay my bills anymore. I coughed lightly. Avoiding her gaze, I said, just thought it was the right thing to do. She didn't press the issue. She just reached out her hand and gently held onto my fingertips. The moment our fingertips touched, my heart warmed up. At noon, the doctor said she could go home to recover. I quickly called a cab, protecting her the whole ride, terrified she'd get bumped or bruised. She still looked incredibly weak, but at least her face wasn't as terrifyingly pale. Back at the apartment, I made her rest in bed. I turned around and went to the kitchen, warmed up the leftover porridge from last night. Surprisingly, this time it wasn't bad. A bit thick, but it smelled wonderfully like rice. Holding the bowl, like an elementary school kid handing in homework, I sat by her bed and said, try it. My first time making porridge. She took the bowl, took a sip. I stared at her reaction, more nervous than pitching to an investor. It's good, she said softly. I smiled. I was genuinely happy. Like a kid receiving praise, then eat a bit more. She ate it bite by bite. I sat beside her, watching her every movement. I suddenly felt a very strange sense of satisfaction in my heart. Before, I would drop tens of thousands to take girls to Michelin-starred restaurants, and I never once felt this kind of peace from it. After finishing, she put down the bowl, looked at me and said Caspian. I turned my head and responded, but I didn't expect her next sentence to be so direct. Why did you stay? I froze for a second. I mean, she paused. You could have left. Things being the way they are, this isn't the life you wanted. I looked down, staring at my own hands. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe because, besides here, I don't really have anywhere else to go. I looked up. She was looking at me, her gaze as clear and quiet as ever. In that moment, I felt as if she saw right through me. When I was 5, I don't know where I found the courage, but I opened my mouth. My mom ran off with another man, leaving my dad alone. He started drinking. Every time he got drunk, he'd say I looked like my mom, and then he'd beat me. I unconsciously touched the scar on my left brow bone. It was very faint, almost invisible now, but I always remembered it. Later, I learned how to use my looks to make people like me. As long as you're good-looking enough, people are willing to give you things. I chuckled lightly, with a touch of self-deprecation. When I met you, I thought I just found another long-term meal ticket. I turned my head to look at her, my voice rough, but I didn't expect that you would respect me. You never used money to humiliate me, even though you knew I didn't want anything from you but that. She didn't say anything. She just held my hand. We all live wearing masks, Caspian, she said softly. I looked at her. The rain outside the window had stopped. A ray of sunlight seeped through the gap in the curtains, landing perfectly on our clasped hands, so warm it almost made me want to cry. 2 days later, her fever broke. She looked a lot more energetic, but I still wouldn't let her work. I stubbornly took on contacting a few people she needed to meet, calling them one by one to reschedule. CEO Caldwell? This is Caspian Vance, Seraphina Thorne's husband. She has a minor cold. Nothing major. Doctor says she just needs a few days of rest. Could we push the investment meeting back a week? Great. Thank you for understanding. Hanging up, I breathed a sigh of relief. This was the first time I was legitimately, openly dealing with outsiders as Seraphina Thorne's husband. In the past, whenever people mentioned me, it was always CEO Thorne's boy toy, the Thorne Group's eye candy. Now, they called me Mr. Vance. It felt pretty good, actually. She walked out of the bedroom. Her face was still a bit pale, but her eyes were much brighter. Could you contact Percival Montgomery? She asked me. He's in medical devices. He might be interested in my new project. I frowned. Aren't you still recovering? You should be lying down. I'm much better now, she said very seriously. And Percival Montgomery isn't an easy guy to book. If we miss this chance, we might not get another. I thought about it for a second. Suddenly, a name flashed through my mind. My eyes lit up. Percival Montgomery? Is that the old guy who loves playing golf? I think I've seen him at the club. Seraphina paused, nodding in surprise. You know him? I flashed a grin. Wouldn't say no, but I know how to get an audience with him. Saying that, I casually picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't contacted in ages. Hey, old he. It's Caspian Vance. Yeah, long time no see. Heard your club has a golf networking tournament next week. Snag a spot for me, will ya? Bringing a friend. Of course. I know the rules. Old price. Thanks, man. Hanging up, I smugly winked at Seraphina. Sorted. Percival Montgomery hits the Green Hills Golf Club every Tuesday without fail. Next week, we'll go bump into him. She looked absolutely dumbfounded, asking me, how do you know all this? I shrugged. Pretending to play it cool, hanging around clubs all these years wasn't for nothing. These old bosses' hobbies, itineraries, even their mistresses. I know them like the back of my hand. I paused, realizing that sounded a bit too direct. Slightly embarrassed, I added, used to think this info was just good for kissing ass. Now I realize it actually has some legitimate uses. She suddenly smiled. It was a smile from the bottom of her heart. Faint smiles lines appearing at the corners of her eyes. You really are a treasure trove. That single, light-hearted sentence felt like a fireball, burning right into my heart. I suddenly realized, over these 3 years I'd received countless expensive gifts, but none of them could compare to how precious that smile was. That night I went downstairs to throw out the trash. The moment I reached the bottom floor, I saw that familiar black Mercedes parked across the street again. This time I was certain. It wasn't just passing by. Someone inside was staring straight at our building. The window was only cracked open a sliver, like some kind of low-key surveillance. I purposefully walked towards the car, wanting to get a good look at the person inside. But the driver slammed on the gas. The car instantly sped off, clean and decisive, without a shred of hesitation. Back in the apartment, I told Serafina about it. After hearing it, her face instantly darkened, spitting out 2 cold words, Silas Vane. I knitted my brows and asked, what kind of grudge does he have against you? Why is he acting like a lunatic, refusing to let go? She stayed silent for a very long time, her fingertips unconsciously rubbing her left ring finger, where her wedding ring was supposed to be, but she had sold it during the bankruptcy. It's a very long story. She finally opened her mouth, her voice so low it was almost inaudible. When the time is right, I'll tell you. I didn't press her, not because I didn't want to ask, but because I suddenly felt a little afraid to hear the answer. Deep into the night, I lay on the makeshift bed setup in the living room. The pillow wasn't very soft, the blankets a bit damp, the paint on the ceiling was peeling, but I didn't feel uncomfortable at all. From the bedroom came the steady sound of Serafina's breathing, like a gentle lullaby. Listening to it, I actually felt at peace. This rundown little apartment compared to our old mansion felt more like a real home. But I knew that black Mercedes lurking in the night would return, like a beast lying in wait, silently watching our lives, waiting for the next chance to strike. The golf ball arsed gracefully through the air, drawing a perfect curve against the sky. Before landing right on the edge of the green, I narrowed my eyes, feigning disappointment as I tasked. What a pity, just missed the hole. Haha, little Caspian, your skills have improved a lot since back in the day. Percival Montgomery heartily patted my shoulder. He was in his 60s, slightly pudgy, ruddy complexion, the quintessential golf course regular. I smiled and shook my head, still miles away from CEO Montgomery's level. I glanced out of the corner of my eye at Serafina not far away. She was chatting with another female entrepreneur, looking incredibly commanding, articulate, and poised. This was already our 3rd day bumping into Percival Montgomery. Relying on my old club connections, I forced my way into this private golf networking event. Percival was a bit surprised to see me at first, but I deliberately played a mediocre game, neither too good nor too bad. He actually got a kick out of acting as my coach. I knew these old bosses. Once they got to flex their mentoring muscles, they easily took a liking to you. Taking advantage of his good mood, I casually asked, "Heard you're looking into AI medical projects recently?" Percival raised an eyebrow, a hint of guardedness flashing in his eyes, but he quickly relaxed. Lowering his voice, he said, "There is such a thing. Still evaluating, though." I pretended to mention it offhandedly. My wife, Serafina Thorne. She used to do research in that exact direction back at the Thorne Group. Accumulated quite a lot of first-hand data. He froze, squinting at me. Serafina Thorne, the CEO Thorne from the Thorne Group? I secretly cheered inside, but kept a straight face. She's starting up a new venture now, building a medical data platform. She's here at the course today, too. I nodded in Serafina's direction. As expected, half an hour later, Serafina and Percival Montgomery were deep in a passionate discussion. I stepped back, watching her confident, graceful demeanor. I spaced out a bit. On the business battlefield, she seemed to glow, a completely different person from the woman in the apartment working overtime until she caught a fever. "Well, what do you know, young Master Caspian?" A grating voice popped up from behind me. "Fallen this far from grace, and you can still sneak into the Big Orange Club?" I turned around, recognizing him instantly. Gideon Sneed, Silas Vane's right-hand man, slicked back hair, impeccably tailored suit, that flashy Richard Mille watch on his wrist. Every single thing on him screamed, "I am doing better than you." I curled my lips. CEO Sneed, long time no see. He looked me up and down, the mockery on his face completely unconcealed. "Heard you guys moved into some dump in the old district." "What? Came here today to fish for a whale to turn things around?" My fingers gripping the golf club tightened involuntarily, but I forced my tone to stay relaxed. CEO Sneed has good intel, but I stepped closer to him, whispering, "I'm actually here accompanying CEO Vane today. He's discussing business in the VIP room." Sure enough, his expression changed immediately, saying, "Impossible. He's clearly at—" My eyes darted. "At where?" A flicker of alarm flashed in his eyes. Realizing he might have slipped up, he instantly dropped his smile, saying coldly, "You're trying to bait me." I shrugged, pretending not to care. I told Gideon Sneed, just asking casually, "Oh, by the way, send CEO Vane my regards. Just tell him, the Thorne family still refems him." The moment those words left my mouth, Gideon's face stiffened like he had just been slapped. He froze for a second, like I had poked a vital nerve. Then he muttered "excuse me" under his breath and hurried away. Watching his retreating back, the string in my heart suddenly pulled taut. That reaction was way too off. Later that evening, when the gathering ended, I accompanied Serafina into a taxi. She looked to be in a good mood. Percival Montgomery was clearly interested in her project. He even set up a time next week for a detailed discussion on the spot. Today went very smoothly. She pulled on her seatbelt, turning to smile at me, a rare hint of relaxation between her brows. "Thank you, Caspian." I was still thinking about Gideon Sneed's twisted expression, didn't really register what she said, and just absent-mindedly went, "What's wrong with you?" She immediately noticed I was spacing out, her tone soft, but carrying her usual sharpness. I hesitated for a moment, but told her anyway. Ran into Gideon Sneed earlier, Silas Vane's lackey. I deliberately dropped a line. The Thorne family still remembers him. Guess what? The guy's face totally dropped. Ran off without even saying goodbye. Her body noticeably stiffened. I noticed her fingers curling slightly, as if suppressing something. "Why did you say that?" Her voice was a bit low. I stared at her side profile. Pausing, I decided to just cut to the chase. "Serafina, what exactly is the grudge between Silas Vane and your family? I've asked you before. You always dodge the question." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she cast her gaze out the window. The taxi drove past the bustling downtown intersections. Neon lights reflected on her face, flickering on and off, making her expression seem just as volatile. After quite a while, she opened her mouth, her voice very light, but every word crystal clear. 10 years ago, my dad's company almost went bankrupt. It was exactly because of Silas Vane. I was stunned. Didn't interrupt her. "They used to be partners," she continued, her voice sounding like it was being dragged out from the depths of her memory. "But Silas Vane shorted the stock behind his back and colluded with the banks to cut off our financing chain. During that time, my dad couldn't sleep night after night, almost jumped off a building." I looked at her side profile, my heart feeling heavy and suffocating. Married for 3 years, she never mentioned any of this to me. Later, he gritted his teeth and fought back. Borrowed from loan sharks, barely saved the company. After that, restructured, rebranded, and the Thorne Group was born. Her voice suddenly grew hoarse at this point, looking down at her folded fingers. And then, Silas Vane's company got hit with a financial scandal. He was swept out the door by his board of directors. He always felt that my dad was the one who stabbed him in the back. "Was it your dad who did it?" I couldn't help but ask. She was silent for a moment, then gently shook her head. "My dad never admitted to it. But what the truth is, I can't say for sure either." A thought suddenly flashed through my mind. "Wait, you just said 10 years ago. Wasn't that 2013? My senior year of college?" Serafina nodded, her expression as calm as if she were narrating someone else's story. "That year, my dad's hair turned white overnight. I gave up my study abroad scholarship and entered the company directly to help him." She smiled, but there wasn't a trace of lightness in it. "So this bankruptcy, to me it's the second time." My throat choked up. My chest felt like it had been smashed by a blunt object. In that instant, I finally understood why she could remain so calm during this disaster. Why she didn't cry or scream, didn't complain about fate, because she had already walked through hell once before. Only me, her husband, knew absolutely nothing about any of this. "Silas Vane is biting at you now? For revenge? That's part of it." Serafina's voice grew even lighter. "And the other part? He wants the algorithm my dad developed." I froze. "The core tech you're using for your startup now?" She nodded. "That is the Thorne Group's most precious asset. Even during the bankruptcy liquidation, I tried every possible way to keep it safe. Silas Vane knows I can rely on this system to make a comeback, so he's playing dirty behind the scenes. On one hand, releasing rumors of my mental breakdown to scare off investors. On the other, sending people to keep an eye on me." The light turned red. The taxi slowly came to a halt. We both looked out the window at the same time. That familiar financial center building was currently broadcasting the financial news. Silas Vane's face appeared prominently on the LED screen. Sharp suit, calm expression, as if everything in the world was under his control. Neither of us spoke, but the air felt like it had turned to ice. Back home, I cooked 2 bowls of instant noodles. Ironically enough, this was probably the only signature dish I'd mastered recently. Serafina was still lost in her thoughts, mechanically stirring the noodles, not noticing I had sneakily put in less seasoning powder. She had a bad stomach. The doctor just reminded us. "Serafina," I tentatively opened my mouth. "Have you ever thought that the Thorne Group's bankruptcy this time might not be pure market risk?" She looked up, her gaze instantly turning sharp. "What do you mean? The timing is too perfect." I put down my chopsticks, my tone calmer than I imagined. "Right after I refused to speak up for Silas Vane, the banks suddenly pulled their loans. Then suppliers swarmed us all at once, demanding payment and cutting ties. This whole process feels too much like it was meticulously manipulated by someone." Her eyes gradually grew sharper, as if something had been ignited in her mind. She whispered, "You're saying Silas Vane orchestrated it behind the scenes?" "I can't be sure," I said slowly. "But if we can find evidence, we can turn defeat into victory." She finished the thought for me. Those usually calm eyes flashed with a brilliance I had never seen before. She suddenly reached out and grabbed me. "Caspian, help me." Her fingers were very cold, but gripping very tightly. I froze for half a second, then squeezed her hand back. "How can I help?" "I need to get close to him." She stared at me, not blinking for a second. "He's on guard against me. But he won't be on guard against you. You used to run in those circles. You know Gideon Sneed and you know the rules of those clubs. You can fish for info. You can dig up intel that we can't get otherwise. I raised an eyebrow. You're asking me to be a corporate spy? She bit her lip, fell silent for a second, then whispered, just think of it as doing it for our future. When she said those two words, I felt my chest burn hot. I never thought the word future could exist in the same sentence for me and her. I stared into her eyes, nodded. Okay, but I have one condition. She was slightly taken aback. What is it? You have to teach me, I said seriously. Teach me business. Teach me about projects, data, financial reports. I don't want to just rely on my face for a living anymore. She was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled, that pride and tenderness intertwining in her eyes. Deal. In the days that followed, I was like a changed man. I started appearing at all sorts of social dinners and networking events, reconnecting with the circles where I was once a familiar face. Outsiders thought the boy toy was back out to fish for gold. Still the same old young Master Caspian relying on Thorn family connections to eat and drink well. But only me and Seraphina knew. Every toast, every greeting, every round of cards were all setups to fish out specific pieces of information. Coming home at night, I would sit at the dining table, taking the fragmented words I got from Gideon Sneed, from the drinking tables, from the club security guards during the day, and relay them piece by piece to Seraphina. Gideon Sneed said Silas Vane has been flying to Hong Kong frequently lately, takes the private jet lane every time, no assistance. He also said the third quarter financial report showed ridiculously high profits, but core business revenue actually dropped. The numbers don't add up. Silas Vane's nephew let it slip while drunk, mentioned his uncle's old tricks worked again. These clues I gathered over the days were like puzzle pieces, slowly piecing together a blurry outline. Every single piece pointed to one person, Silas Vane. He was never a clean businessman. I should have known that night. I returned from a long, agonizingly annoying drinking session, reeking of smoke and cheap laughter, but my mind was exceptionally clear. The moment I entered the door, the dim, warm light of the house gave me a wave of nostalgia. Seraphina was slumped over the dining table, asleep. Her hair was slightly messy, surrounded by a thick stack of documents and messy notes. I walked closer to her, looked down. She had drawn a complex relationship web. At the center was a piece of paper with Silas Vane's photo, densely connected to several banks, shell companies, and familiar supplier names. My heart tightened. She had already gone much deeper than me. I crouched down, carefully picking her up from the table. She was much lighter than I imagined. When she rested against my shoulder, I could almost hear the fragile crack of her bones. Caspian, she murmured groggily, her voice sounding nasal and slightly whiny. Sleep, I responded softly, carrying her into the bedroom, carefully placing her on the bed. But she didn't let go. Instead, she tightly wrapped her arms around my neck, whispering, "Don't go." I paused, freezing completely on the spot. Her face was very close to mine, so close I could see the trembling shadows of her eyelashes. I could smell the faint grapefruit scent in her hair. In that moment, I almost forgot what we were fighting against. Forgot about the bankruptcy, the surveillance, the media, the coldness of human nature. All I knew was she was in my arms, soft, warm, my wife. I slowly lay down, pulling her into my embrace. She didn't struggle. Instead, she snuggled closer. We held each other quietly in the dark. Only the alternating sounds of our breathing remained. I found some things, I said with a hoarse voice, breaking the silence. Silas Vane likely manipulated several key suppliers through shell companies, getting them to collectively squeeze the Thorn Group. I could feel her body suddenly tense up. Are you sure? I sighed and said, not enough yet. The evidence is too thin. We need to dig a little deeper. She didn't speak. I thought she was going back into that silent, cold, analytical mode. But instead, she suddenly rolled over, leaned in, and gently, almost hesitantly, pressed a kiss to my lips. That kiss was as light as a feather, but it stirred up roaring waves in my heart. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't know what she was thanking me for. For risking everything to gather info? For staying up late trying to piece the truth together for her? Or just for right now? I hugged her silently, accompanying her on this thorn-filled path. I didn't ask, just hugged her even tighter, never feeling more certain than in this very moment. She wasn't the Ice Queen CEO of the Thorn Group, not a symbol on some business page, nor the woman I used to think was impossibly out of reach. She is my wife, and I am the only person she can rely on right now. Outside the window, I sharply picked up the sound of tires rubbing against the pavement, without needing to look. I knew that black Mercedes was back again. That guy was like a greedy vulture, staying parked outside our building all night, waiting for us to expose a weakness, so he could pounce and tear us apart. But what he didn't know was, we were no longer that estranged married couple. We are now comrades fighting side by side, the strongest alliance in the storm. Congratulations, CEO Thorn. We've decided to invest in your project. CEO Caldwell smiled and extended a hand to Seraphina. I stood behind her, half a step back, clearly seeing her fingertips trembling. From moving into that cramped little apartment to securing our first round of funding today, we had persevered for 3 months. Seraphina worked until dawn for 92 days straight, and I, for the first time in the capacity of an assistant, sat on one side of a formal conference table, wearing a rented suit, holding materials I spent an entire week preparing. I had memorized every single page inside out. I could even recite the key data points in my sleep. Thank you all for your trust. Her voice was clear and firm. Medical data analysis is the blue ocean of the next decade. I won't let you down. She spoke so calmly. Only I knew what she had been through behind the scenes. Leaving the building, the sunlight was perfect. Serafina walked ahead of me, her steps much lighter than when we arrived. The sunlight fell on her face, her silhouette so clear it was almost transparent. She had lost so much weight. Even her suit jacket hung loose on her. My heart suddenly ached. I wanted to reach out and support her, but hesitated for a second, until we got into the car. The moment she grabbed my arm, I realized she was smiling like a little girl. We did it. First round of funding, 20 million. Her eyes were so bright they seemed to glow. Enough to kickstart the project. I couldn't help but laugh along with her, feeling like we just won a major battle. You are amazing, Serafina. I knew you could do it. It's us, she corrected me, lightly pinching my arm. Without you helping me find contacts, doing background checks, and keeping an eye on Gideon Sneed, I couldn't have gotten this investment so fast. Us, I chewed on that word repeatedly, my heart growing warm. Oh right, she flipped through the documents. There's a reception after the signing ceremony next week. You need to prepare for it. No problem, I said, starting the car while glancing at her. But before that, you have to see a doctor. She froze, frowning. What doctor? Drop the act. I pointed to where her stomach was. I've woken up 3 times this week in the middle of the night and saw you throwing up in the bathroom. Your stomach pains are getting more frequent. She turned her head away and said, just stress, that's all. I wasn't backing down. Either you go to the hospital yourself tomorrow, or I tie you up and drag you there. She was visibly shocked by my tone. This was probably the first time I ever spoke to her with an attitude that brooked absolutely no argument. She stared at me for a while, finally whispering, tomorrow afternoon. I have a half-hour gap. I nodded, deal. The next day I waited downstairs at her office building 20 minutes early. When she came down, her complexion was even worse than yesterday. The dark circles under her eyes were terrifyingly dark. Her lips were as white as paper. You stayed up all night again, I frowned. She weakly waved her hand. Just tweaking. Some proposals? Before she could finish her sentence, her entire body suddenly doubled over forward, clutching her stomach. I didn't have time to overthink. Flagged down a taxi, shoved her inside, and headed straight for the downtown hospital. The smell of disinfectant assaulted our noses. I supported her as we walked into the gastroenterology department. She was still trying to act tough, walking perfectly straight, as if she never allowed herself to show weakness. Dr. Abernathy was an old friend of her father's. He helped us get an emergency consultation. After hearing her symptoms, his brows furrowed tightly. Let's do a gastroscopy first. I knew that was a rather uncomfortable procedure, but I didn't expect watching it would make me feel so awful. I stood outside, watching her lie on the bed, the doctor sliding that long, thin tube down her throat, her fingers gripping the bed sheets in a death grip, her face pale, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. I suddenly wished I could take this hit for her. After the exam ended, she leaned on me as we walked out of the exam room, completely drained. I helped her sit down, ran off to buy 2 cups of hot tea. When I returned, she was leaning back in her chair with her eyes closed, wearing an exhaustion that didn't belong on her face. Thanks. She took the tea, her fingertips icy cold. Half an hour later, we were called into the consulting room. The doctor looked serious, a thick stack of reports spread out on his desk. In that instant, my heart started to sink. Ms. Thorne, the exam results show a 2-centimeter ulcer in your stomach, irregular edges. Dr. Abernathy's words hit me like a cudgel to the forehead. The biopsy results will take 3 days, but based on my experience, it is very likely early-stage stomach cancer. My entire body froze stiff. I heard Serafina gasp. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her fingers dig into her knees, but she didn't make a sound. Her expression was still calm, terrifyingly calm. Are you certain? She asked, her voice exceptionally steady. 80% sure, Dr. Abernathy sighed. You've had a highly irregular diet for a long time, immense work stress, plus a family history. Family history? I interjected, my throat dry. What does that mean? My mother passed away from stomach cancer, Serafina said softly. When I was 12, I was at a loss for words. I only felt like a bucket of ice water had been poured into my chest. All these years, I had never truly known her. She was so dominant, so rational. I thought she was indestructible. I never saw what was hidden beneath that armor. But since we caught it early, the cure rate is very high, Dr. Abernathy added. We need to schedule surgery and follow-up treatments as soon as possible. Leaving the consulting room, she walked very fast. I was practically jogging to keep up. She flagged down a taxi right at the hospital entrance and spat out the company's address. The company? I looked at her in disbelief. Right now? You need to go home and rest. She didn't even look at me. The agreements aren't signed yet. The project has to launch. If I really need surgery, I have to get everything arranged properly. I grabbed her wrist, unprecedentedly forceful. Serafina, wait a minute. You were just told by a doctor that you might have cancer. Can't you just, even for 1 hour, let yourself process this? I don't have time to break down. Her voice suddenly spiked, her eyes bloodshot. Do you know what it cost me to get to today? I cannot fall. The moment I fall, Silas Vane will pounce on me and shred whatever little I have left. Her whole body was trembling. This was the first time I saw her lose control like this. Like a bowstring pulled to its absolute limit, ready to snap at any second. I didn't care how she struggled. I pulled her forcefully into my arms. I won't let you fall, I whispered in her ear, holding her tightly. I'm here. Even if the sky falls down, I'll hold it up. Her body stayed stiff for 2 seconds, and then completely went limp, burying her head into my chest, her tears burning hot like fire, in my arms. She was like a warrior finally shedding her armor, crying silently. I stayed perfectly still, just holding her, like I was holding our entire tempestuous future. That night, uncharacteristically, she went to bed early. I sat by the edge of the bed, holding her hand, her fingers thin and cold. I stared at the ceiling and said, I checked for early-stage stomach cancer. The 5-year survival rate is over 90%. You're gonna be fine. She looked at the ceiling, without responding. Do you know what I'm most afraid of? She suddenly spoke up. Not dying, but losing everything right on the verge of success. I turned my head to look at her. 10 years ago, my dad had just survived Silas Vane's sabotage. The company was preparing to go public, and then he had a brain hemorrhage. He never made it back to the boardroom. She closed her eyes before continuing. I fought like hell, so I wouldn't end up on his path. A sharp pain struck my chest. I finally understood her madness, her stubbornness, her revising proposals all night, throwing up blood at dawn but still getting up to check project progress. She wasn't fiercely ambitious. She was racing against fate itself. This time will be different. I squeezed her hand and said, You have me. This time, you are not alone. She turned her face to look at me, her eyes shining brightly in the dark. Why? She asked softly. You clearly could have left. Why are you still here? I stayed silent for a moment. Why? At first, it was because I had nowhere else to go. Later, it was because I felt guilty, seeing her suffer. Even later, I saw her secretly throwing up blood after running a fever late at night, hiding in the bathroom making no sound. She always acted tough and never asked me for help. Yet I started caring about her every single move. Her eyes, her shoulders, her sneakily rubbing her stomach while eating. She made me feel like I wanted to be someone who could be relied on, because I looked at her, slowly saying, I want to see how far we can go together. The day the results were confirmed, I sat with Serafina in the doctor's office, listening to Dr. Abernathy use an extremely calm tone to tell us, the biopsy results are back. It is early-stage stomach cancer. I felt like someone had punched me squarely in the chest, even though I was mentally prepared. In that instant, my brain still went completely blank. The surgery was scheduled for a week later. Over the next 7 days, Serafina was like someone possessed, frantically arranging every single detail of the project before its launch. I had never seen someone squeeze themselves so hard, as if she wanted to use this final stretch of time to leave the world a flawless answer sheet. And as for me, it was the first time I did something so seriously. I contacted the hospital, ran the procedures, prepared the surgery fees. I even read up on post-op care knowledge over and over again, so I could take decent care of her. I even watched several short training videos for caregivers. She never asked me to do these things, but I knew I had to do it. Where did you get the money to pay the deposit? That day when she found out I prepaid 50 grand in surgery fees, her tone was full of doubt. I shrugged, sold a few watches. She was stunned for a second. Those watches were my most prized possessions. In the past, I'd rather borrow money than sell them. Don't give me that look. I pinched her cheek and said, I don't have anywhere to wear them right now anyway. Selling them actually feels kind of liberating. The night before the surgery, she finally stopped to rest. We sat on the balcony of our small apartment. The May evening breeze carried the scent of flowers. The neon lights in the distance flickered on and off. I almost wanted to lie to myself that everything was normal. She suddenly spoke up. I made a list. What list? I turned my head to look at her. If the surgery doesn't go well, she looked down and pulled out a piece of paper. This is all the company's current resources, contacts, passwords. You'll need it later. My chest tightened violently. I pushed that piece of paper back into her hand. I don't need this. You said you'd run the company yourself. You're going to recover, remember? She didn't look at me, just stared into the distance. I just want to be prepared. My father left absolutely nothing behind back then. I don't want it to be like that. I turned around, both hands gripping her shoulders tightly. Look at me, Serafina. You are not your father. This time will not be a repeat. You will wake up. We are going to watch the company take off together, fight Silas Vane together, grow old together. My throat hitched. Her eyes glistened with tears, gently leaning into my embrace. Promise me one thing. What is it? If tomorrow after the surgery, the doctor tells you the results are bad, don't hide it from me. I want to know the truth. I nodded, tightening my arms around her. I promise. The surgery lasted 4 hours. I was going crazy waiting outside, pacing back and forth, downing 6 cups of undrinkable coffee. Every second felt like torture. If something happens to her, what do I do? When Dr. Abernathy finally came out, I almost dropped to my knees. The surgery was a success, he said. The tumor is completely removed. No signs of spreading. She is very lucky. In that moment, I genuinely almost cried when I walked into the hospital room and saw her pale face, the eye drip in the back of her hand, lying there quietly. I finally understood what true fear meant. Not bankruptcy, not poverty, but the fear of losing her. In that moment, I realized I had already fallen in love with her, not because of who she was, not because of what she could give me, just because she is her. She woke up in the middle of the night. The anesthesia wore off, frowning in pain. I quickly pressed the call button for the nurse, while using a wet cotton swab to gently moisten her cracked lips. Was it a success? She asked weakly. I nodded, leaning over to kiss her forehead. A massive success. Doctor says you can live another 50 years. She revealed a tiny smile. as light as moonlight falling on the hospital bed. Our company will wait for you to recover." I cupped her face and continued, "Nothing else matters." She closed her eyes, but her hand hooked tightly around mine, as if afraid I'd disappear if she let go. I sat by her bed, watching her breathing gradually steady. For the first time, I started seriously thinking about the weight of the word forever. Rainwater slowly snaked down the window pane. The city lights melted into a blurry mess before my eyes. I stood in the cafe across from the Vane Group's building, gripping a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. My eyes locked dead onto that lit window. Silas Vane's private office. This was my third consecutive day observing him from here. I had memorized his routine. Every Wednesday night, from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., he would handle documents alone in his office, with only bodyguards stationed outside the door. This was the best opportunity I had waited for. I glanced down at my watch. 7:50 p.m. I took a deep breath, downed that bitter coffee in one gulp, grabbed my briefcase from by my feet, and walked into the drizzling rain. The rain soaked my shoulders, seeping through my collar into my shirt, but I didn't care. 8 p.m. sharp. I stepped through the front doors of the Vane Group, wearing a sharp suit, sporting the social smile I'd perfected over the years, looking just like an ordinary employee working overtime. "Hello, do you have an appointment?" The receptionist looked up at me. I curled the corners of my lips. "I'm CEO Sneed's guest. We scheduled for 8 p.m. Gideon Sneed, Marketing Department." She looked down to check the registry. "CEO Sneed doesn't seem to be in today?" Strange. He specifically said he'd wait for me on the 28th floor. I frowned, pulling out my phone, pretending to swipe the screen, adding, "I'll give him a quick call to confirm." Before she could say anything else, I was already walking briskly towards the elevators, pulling out the keycard I bought for a premium from Gideon's assistant, expertly swiping the card, pressing the button for the 28th floor. Right before the elevator doors slowly closed, I caught a glimpse of the receptionist nervously picking up the phone. Every second the elevator ascended felt like agony. Arriving at the 28th floor, everything was as quiet as I expected. Only the office at the end of the hall was lit. I could hear Silas Vane's voice coming from behind the door, his tone cold, his speech steady. "Keep an eye on Seraphina Thorne. We must acquire her new company, at all costs." My fists quietly clenched. I lowered my body, slipped into the adjacent secretary's office, hiding in the pitch black. With only the faint blue glow of a computer screen, I gently closed the door, pulling out a pair of white gloves and a mini camera from my briefcase. 10 minutes, I silently chanted in my head. I knew, as long as he left his office midway, whether for the restroom or to meet someone, I would have 10 minutes. 10 minutes was enough. Every second stretched into needles. I could clearly hear my own racing heartbeat. My palms were sweaty. Even my spine was breaking out in cold sweat. Finally, 20 minutes later, that office door clicked open. Silas Vane left, his footsteps steady and powerful, fading down the corridor. Without hesitation, I rushed in. The desk was a massive custom mahogany piece, imposing. I circled around to the back, crouching down to check the drawers. Locked, of course, no problem. I was more than prepared for this step. Mingling in the rich circles all these years, I didn't just learn how to drink and kiss ass. I picked up some more practical skills too. 30 seconds. The lock popped open. Inside sat several neat stacks of documents. I rifled through them rapidly, my eyes scanning the titles of every page like a radar. Suddenly, a folder marked Thorne Group Top Secret jumped into my line of sight. My heart tightened. With slightly trembling fingers, I opened it. The moment I flipped past the first page, my blood turned to ice. It was a meticulously horrifying business plan, densely documenting how to use bank credit manipulation, supply chain cutoffs, and media opinion to systematically destroy the Thorne Group step by step. The date at the bottom of the document was 3 months before Thorne Group's bankruptcy. "It really was you old fox." I gritted my teeth, suppressing my emotions, quickly pulling out my mini camera, snapping pictures page by page. Every shutter click felt like an accusation. Just as I flipped to the final few pages, the sound of footsteps suddenly echoed in my ears. Deep, steady, getting closer and closer. Fudge. He came back way too early. I frantically shoved the documents back into the drawer, my fingertips slipping in my panic, but there was absolutely no time to fix the angle of the files. The footsteps were practically at the door. I quickly scanned the room. The only exit was an inconspicuous lounge room attached to the office. I charged inside, gently closing the door. Holding my breath, I pressed my entire body against the door panel. Through the crack in the door, I saw Silas Vane walk in, wearing his usual composed expression. He walked over to his desk, his brows furrowing slightly. "Strange," he muttered to himself, rubbing the lock of the drawer with his finger. I remember locking it. Every nerve in my body was pulled taut, my heart thundering, the blood rushing so fast my eardrums were roaring. He pulled out his phone. "Security? Check the cameras on the 28th floor. Did anyone enter my office just now?" I couldn't wait any longer. I forcefully shoved the door open, knocking over the chair beside him, and bolted out. Silas Vane shouted, "Stop him!" I sprinted towards the elevator, frantically mashing the buttons, but the elevator didn't respond at all. The system was locked down. Son of a nutcracker. I immediately turned and charged towards the fire escape. My footsteps slammed onto the metal stairs, echoing loudly. Shadows were already chasing behind me. At least 3 people were on my tail. I ran downward like my life depended on it. 13th floor, 12th floor. My panting felt like my lungs were on fire. running to the 15th floor. I suddenly switched directions, dashing into the office area. The office was empty. I dove straight into a storage room, quietly closing the door. Leaning against the door panel, completely soaked in sweat, like I had just been dragged out of a pool. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Serafina. I didn't dare answer, only tapped a preset text message. Safe. We'll contact you later. 5 minutes later. It gradually quieted down outside. I slowly pushed the door open, poked my head out to look. Empty. I walked out of the storage room, taking a few deep breaths, straightened out my sweat-soaked suit jacket, tried hard to regain my composure, and strode towards the elevator lobby. But just as I was about to reach the elevators, a familiar, sinister voice rang out behind me. Caspian, long time no see. I spun around abruptly. Sure enough, Gideon Sneed. With 2 burly men in black suits trailing behind him, he was tossing a switchblade in his hand, smiling like a treacherous fox. CEO Vane would like to invite you for a cup of tea, he said. I took a step back, my back hitting the cold wall. No need, thanks CEO Vane for his hospitality for me. That's not up to you. He crooked his finger. The 2 burly men immediately lunged at me. I dodged the first guy's tackle sideways, but couldn't avoid the second guy's heavy punch. It landed squarely in my abdomen. The intense pain instantly made me double over, but muscle memory kicked in. Instincts honed from years of brawling at drinking parties and clubs. I didn't hesitate to deliver a back elbow strike right to his face. Hearing the crisp crack of his jawbone was almost more satisfying than the punch. Damn, you can fight, Gideon cursed, finally dropping his playful attitude and stepping up personally. Just as I was about to meet his attack, I saw him flash that switchblade, a glint of cold steel. My left arm felt cold, followed quickly by warm liquid sliding down my sleeve. Hand it over. He closed in on me, his voice chilling, his eyes filled with cruelty. CEO Vane knows what you photographed. I gritted my teeth, forcing out a twisted smile. What stuff? I just came to visit an old friend for nostalgia's sake. Playing tough, huh? He said, slicing again, grazing my ribs. It hurt so much I almost screamed out loud. I leaned against the wall, panting heavily, realizing I probably wasn't walking out of this building tonight, but I couldn't give it up. Those photos, that evidence, was Serafina's only chance to fight back. Fine. I slowly raised one hand and said, come take it yourself, in my pocket. Gideon indeed stepped closer. That was exactly the moment I was waiting for. I used every ounce of strength I had left to headbutt him right in the bridge of his nose. Smash. Blood splattered everywhere. He stumbled back, screaming in pain. I took the chance to sprint towards the stairwell, but my injuries were too severe. I was moving as slow as running in a dream. Right as I turned the corner on the 14th floor, I got kicked square in the back by someone catching up to me. The back of my head smashed brutally against the concrete steps. A wave of dizziness nearly swallowed me whole. I fuzzily felt someone rummaging through my pockets, taking my phone and wallet. But nobody searched my socks. Where the camera was hidden, they didn't find it. I heard someone say, bring him back. We'll question him slowly. Gideon's voice sounded like he was pinching his nose. Clearly my headbutt did some serious damage. I knew that once they dragged me to Silas Vane, it was truly game over, so I used my last bit of strength, broke free from their grip, flipped over the stairwell railing, and threw myself down. Falling towards the 13th floor, everything faded to black. When I woke up again, I only felt the blinding light scraping against my eyeballs like knives. I twitched my eyelids and immediately squinted shut from the pain. You're awake. It was Serafina's voice. I pushed with all my might to open my eyes. Seeing her haggard face, her eyes were red and swollen. Obviously, she had been crying, but right now, her expression was as cold as ice. Hoss! I forced out a tiny bit of sound. Downtown hospital. Her voice was shaking. You fell down the stairs. Skull fracture, 2 broken ribs. Left arm needed 12 stitches. And a concussion. She was practically yelling. What the hell were you thinking? Are you insane? I wanted to laugh, but my face twitched in pain. I could only tug at the corners of my mouth. I was thinking about our future. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor with a screech. Do you know you almost died? Just for a few photos, was it worth it? I lifted the arm that wasn't hooked up to the IV, trying hard to grasp her wrist. Even the slightest exertion made my whole body tremble. Worth it, I managed to spit out with great difficulty. Camera in my sock. Silas Vane's business plan. Got it all. She froze, deflating like a punctured balloon, slumping back into her chair, covering her face. You idiot! Her voice carried a sob. I'd rather you hadn't gone. I never needed those things. I had never seen her like this. Not when the company went bankrupt. Not in her own hospital bed. Not when investors mocked her coldly. Back then, she was always as calm as a blade. But now, she hadn't shed a single tear. Yet she made my heart ache like it was ripped open. I opened my hand. Though it hurt terribly, I still tried my best to embrace her. Serafina, I started weakly. Listen to me, the camera. I got it. She interrupted me, taking a deep breath, as if trying hard to suppress her emotions. The photos are downloaded. The evidence is solid, enough to prove Silas Vane orchestrated the Thorn Group's bankruptcy. I nodded. For a moment, feeling an indescribable sense of peace and satisfaction. My vision was going dark. I closed my eyes, murmuring, that's good, 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 my foot! Her voice spiked sharply, like a snapped violin string echoing loudly. Do you know how I felt when I got the call from the hospital? Saying you were brought in covered in blood. I thought you were dead. She choked up. I struggled to open my eyes, seeing 2 distinct tear tracks on her cheeks, dropping one by one, falling uncontrollably without warning. I had never seen her cry. Even when the company went bankrupt, even when diagnosed with cancer, she just calmly arranged everything, as composed as a battlefield commander. But now, she was crying. Because of me, I'm sorry. I looked at her, my voice raspy, but coming from the bottom of my heart. But I had to do it. Why? She practically screamed, her voice hoarse and trembling. You were never this kind of self-sacrificing person. You clearly could have dodged. You could have run. Because I love you, I interrupted her, my voice very soft. But it seemed to shatter every other sound in the hospital room, leaving only the ECCG monitor beeping steadily. She froze, looking at me with wide eyes, her lips quivering, unable to say a single word. I managed a small smile, which caused a spasm of pain in my ribs, saying, I know this sounds ridiculous. When we got married 3 years ago, I just treated you as a long-term meal ticket. You were strong, calm, possessed things I never had. I relied on you to live, and lived pretty comfortably without a shred of guilt. I paused, my throat dry. But the day the Thorn Group went bankrupt, my first reaction wasn't how to bail out. It was, what are you gonna do? I realized that besides being by your side, I didn't want to be anywhere else. Her tears flowed faster, but she still didn't speak. These past few months, I saw the real you, I continued, my voice as raspy as if cut by a knife. You are strong, smart, maddeningly stubborn. But I also saw the real me. It turns out I'm not just some useless playboy. I can protect you, even if just a little bit. I reached out to hold her hand. Her knuckles were icy cold, but she squeezed back tightly, as if terrified I'd vanish in the next second. So, yes, I love you. I looked into her eyes. No longer dodging, no longer running away. Not because you are CEO Thorn, not because you have money or resources, but because you are you. She lowered her head, her forehead gently resting against the back of our hands, her body trembling, tears falling onto my hand drop by drop, scalding like fire. You bastard, she sobbed. You had to wait until you were half dead to say all this. I wiped the tears from her face with my thumb. Now you know, so stop crying. I'm still right here, aren't I? Right here, my foot. She snapped her head up, her eyes red, glaring at me angrily. The doctor says you have to stay in bed for 2 weeks. I grinned, even though it hurt to grimace. But the smile was genuine. That's perfect then. You can take care of me, just like I took care of you. She finally laughed, laughing while crying, gently smacking me. In your dreams. Before I could get too smug, she suddenly turned serious again. But we can't let our guard down. Silas Vane won't just let this go. He definitely knows we're investigating him by now. I nodded, the pain hitting me in waves like the tide. I took a deep breath. We have to speed things up. Those photos. Can they put him in jail? Not enough. She shook her head, her eyes full of cool calculation. This is just the first step. We still have to dig into his tax evasion issues. Capital transfers, insider trading. Only by completely dragging him down will he never dare to make a comeback. I thought for a moment and said Gideon Sneed once mentioned while drunk that Silas Vane has been flying to Hong Kong frequently. Could it be tied to money laundering or offshore accounts? Her eyes lit up. Very likely. I'll have someone look into it. She stood up, leaned down to kiss my forehead. You focus on recovering. I'll handle the rest. I grabbed her hand, saying solemnly, be careful. He's a cornered dog right now. She nodded, a flash of killer instinct in her eyes. Don't worry. This time I'm not alone. I've already contacted a few of my father's old friends and the former senior executives of the Thorn Group's legal department. Silas Vane messed with the wrong people. The moment she left the hospital room, I suddenly understood. I was finally no longer a burden to her, but someone truly fighting by her side. I stared at the ceiling. The cuts on my arm throbbed. My ribs still hurt, but my heart felt more grounded than ever before. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew. From today on, I would fight for her with my life and never retreat again. The rain outside the window stopped under the twilight. The entire city awakened in lights. I knew our battle had only just begun. The day I was discharged, the sunlight was brighter than any time in my memory. I stood at the hospital entrance, squinting to adapt to the light. My left arm was still in a sling. The incisions near my ribs throbbed slightly with every breath. Serafina stood beside me, holding my duffel bag, her hand gently supporting my back. Her movements were very light, but it made me feel entirely steady. Don't give me that look. I flashed a wide grin, trying hard to look like a normal person. Comforting her, the doctor said I'm recovering very well. She rolled her eyes at me. A concussion plus fractures is called recovering well? But I still caught a glimpse of that barely concealed curve at the corner of her mouth. I could tell she was in a good mood. A black sedan slowly pulled up in front of us. I raised an eyebrow, turning to her rental or bought. Her tone was as crisp as ever. Used. But the specs are good. We can't rely on taxis forever. I let out a low whistle. Looks like the funding went smoothly. The moment I sat in the car, I realized this was no ordinary used car. The exterior was low-key, but the interior was all top-tier custom. Genuine leather seats, the center console glowing with a cold, futuristic light. Serafina started the engine. The roar was low and powerful. I could tell. It was heavily modified. You did some work on this car, I asked. The corner of her mouth ticked up. Bulletproof glass, reinforced chassis, and an independent tracking system. She shot me a sideways glance. You thought I was just doing it for show? Silas Vane won't leave things alone. A swirl of indescribable emotions rose in my chest. This woman silently factored every single danger into the equation for me. In the past, she'd just coldly say, be careful. Now she used a custom armored car to say she cared. The car didn't head towards our cramped little apartment. Instead, it drove straight into a high-end residential area downtown. I raised an eyebrow and asked, "We moved? Renting for now. Good security," she said. "We'll decide where to go once this is all over." The new apartment was on the top floor, spacious, bright, with an open panoramic view. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city, a mix of feelings washing over me. 3 months ago, we were still living in that moldy old building, surviving on bad porridge, IV drips, and each other. Now, while we couldn't call it a full comeback, I knew our battlefield had shifted locations. "Like it?" She walked up beside me and asked. I nodded, but my eyes landed on the pile of documents on the coffee table and her laptop. "You brought all these over?" She nodded, her expression instantly turning serious. "We need to talk." We sat down together on the sofa. She opened her laptop. On the screen was an impeccably organized document, listing out all of Silas Vane's illegal activities: stock manipulation, commercial fraud, even money laundering. I stared at those words, couldn't help but whistle. This stuff is enough to put him in prison. That's exactly the problem. She bit her lower lip, pulling up another file. Silas Vane doesn't operate alone. Behind him is an entire chain of interests. Government officials, senior bank executives. If we expose this, we'd be offending a massive web of people. I picked up where she left off, frowning deeply. And before it even goes to trial, they might just burn all the evidence. Her voice dropped lower. "It's more than that. You would become a target too. He already came after you once. If he knows we're holding these things right now." I reached out, holding her hand. "So you're worried about me?" "Of course I'm worried about you!" Serafina practically yelled it out, then immediately lowered her voice. "Look at the state you're in. What if next time it's not fractures?" "But," her voice suddenly choked off. I froze, for the first time genuinely seeing tears glistening in her eyes. That ruthless, decisive female CEO of the business world was now losing control because she was worried about me. "Serafina," I comforted her softly. "I'm not afraid of danger. I'm only afraid of being useless." She took a deep breath, trying hard to calm herself down. "I know, but we have to think of a foolproof plan." I stayed silent for a moment. A thought suddenly flashed through my mind, my heart clenching. Maybe I need to contact someone. She looked up at me. "Who?" "My father," when I said that sentence. Even I found it unbelievable. Serafina was clearly stunned. In our 3 years of marriage, I had almost never willingly brought up my father. She only knew my relationship with him was terrible. "Your father? Isn't he a prosecutor?" she asked tentatively. I nodded, a mocking smile curling my lips. "Deputy Chief Prosecutor of the Provincial Procuratorate, Judge Nathaniel Vance, nicknamed the Iron Judge Vance, impartial and incorruptible, cold as ice to everyone." I paused, my eyes turning dark, "and also my #1 enemy for the past 20 years. Because of your mother?" she asked softly. "That's only part of it." I walked to the window, staring at the blurry city lights in the night, my chest churning. I hate him, not just because he drank and hit me, but because he clearly had the power to track down my mom's whereabouts. Yet he chose to give up. Footsteps sounded from behind. Serafina carefully wrapped her arms around me from behind. Purposely avoiding my injuries, she asked, "Are you sure you want to contact him?" I turned around, looking straight into her eyes. "For you, I'm willing to try. His resources and network in the judicial system are too important to us." She looked at me, her gaze complex, as if weighing the options, and as if her heart was aching for me. Ultimately, she just nodded. "If you are ready, I support you." I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over that number in my contacts for a long time, my heart pounding like a war drum. Finally, I pressed it. The moment the call connected, my throat tightened. "Hello?" A deep, stern voice came from the other end. "It's me." My voice trembled. The other side was silent for a few seconds. "Caspian." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "I need your help." A long silence made me almost think he hung up, until my father spoke again. "What is it?" I briefly explained Silas Vane's illegal acts, and the evidence Serafina and I had in our hands, deliberately avoiding any personal emotions. After listening, my father threw out a few sharp professional questions that made me sweat, then simply said, "Send the evidence to my email. The address hasn't changed. No promises, no warmth, but also no rejection." That was Judge Nathaniel Vance, always strictly business. When I hung up, I realized my back was drenched in cold sweat. Serafina handed me a glass of water. When I took it, my fingers were still trembling slightly. "He said he'd look at the evidence." I forced a smile. For him, that's already considered an enthusiastic response. She gently squeezed my shoulder. "Thank you." I shook my head. "Don't thank me. You and I have been in the same boat for a long time." I hesitated for a moment, adding, "But strangely, when I mentioned the grudge between Silas Vane and the Thorne family, he didn't seem surprised at all. It was like he already knew something." Serafina frowned deeply. "What do you mean?" "I'm not sure." I suppressed the unease in my heart. "He told me to meet him tomorrow for a detailed discussion. We'll find out then." The next afternoon, I went alone to the agreed-upon tea house. It was an old tea house hidden in an alley downtown, antique style, unusually quiet. Pushing the door in, the first thing I saw was my father. He was already sitting in a corner booth, wearing an immaculate suit, his hair much grayer than in my memory, but still combed perfectly into place. The wrinkles on his face were deep, his gaze as sharp as an eagle. I walked over, my voice a bit stiff. "Dad." He looked up at me, his eyes sharp enough to seemingly see right through me. "How are your injuries?" I froze for a second. I didn't expect him to actually ask that question first. "Fine. Almost healed." He nodded, sliding a folder across the table. I opened it to look. It was his legal opinion analysis. The handwriting so neat it looked printed. The evidence is good, but not enough to shake Silas Vane, he said. You have two paths right now. One is to keep a low profile and exchange it for interests. Two is to dig deeper and kill him in one strike. I answered, without hesitation, the second path. An emotion I couldn't decipher flashed through his eyes. He said, your mother had that same personality back then. I was stunned. This was the first time we brought her up head-on in 20 years. I tentatively asked, did you already know about the Thorpe family's matters? He was silent for a few seconds, pulled out a yellowed case file from his briefcase and said, 25 years ago, I handled a case. You'll understand once you read it. I flipped it open. When I read the first page, my breathing almost stopped. Victim, Arthur Thorne. Suspect, Silas Vane. This was an attempted murder case file. Serafina never mentioned this, I muttered. She probably didn't even know, he sighed. There was insufficient evidence back then. I couldn't do anything either. I kept flipping pages until I saw a familiar name, Evelyn Thorne, Serafina's mother. She was the only eyewitness, but suddenly passed away from illness right before she was due to testify. I whispered, stomach cancer. My father asked back, expressionless. Too much of a coincidence, isn't it? I closed my eyes, fighting back the burning rage. Help us this time, okay? He nodded. I will assist you on the legal front, but to catch Silas Vane, you have to rely on yourselves. When I left the tea house, my mind was a tangled mess. He was much more cooperative than I imagined, which also made me see the justice he once possessed again. But as soon as I got home, I found a piece of paper slipped under the door. Tonight at 8 p.m., Pearl Hotel Room 2808. Come alone, Trixie Bell. I frowned. We cut contact months ago. For her to suddenly pop up now, there had to be a problem. I gave the note and the case files to Serafina. As she read through those files, her face grew paler and paler. So the grudge between us is far deeper than I thought. I wrapped my arm around her shoulder. We will make him pay. She nodded, then looked at the note and asked me, are you planning to meet Trixie Bell? My eyes darkened. Opening my mouth, I said, if she really was bought by Silas Vane, I'd love to see what trick he's trying to play next. Are you going? A sharp glint flashed in my eyes. Without hesitation, I said, of course, but not alone. We go together. At 7:50 p.m., Serafina and I arrived at the Pearl Hotel early. Per my dad's advice, we booked the room directly opposite 2808 as well. Fraud prevention, trap avoidance, leaving a backup plan is always the right call. I walked into 2808 alone, while Serafina stayed in the room across the hall, using a pre-installed micro camera to observe the situation inside the room. When the door opened, Trixie Bell was already waiting inside. She wore a revealing red dress, her heavy makeup blindingly tacky. As soon as she saw me walk in, she pulled a fake, forced smile. Young Master Caspian, long time no see. I stood at the door without moving. Spit it out, whatever it is. Why so cold? She pouted, walking 2 steps closer, her hips swaying. I heard you haven't been doing so well lately. Silas Vane has been giving you a pretty hard time, huh? My eyes turned cold. Asking her he sent you? Her expression froze for a second. A moment later, she recovered her flirty, seductive act. I just care about you. What's so great about a woman like Serafina Thorne anyway? She knows absolutely nothing besides work, and now even her company is. Shut up. I cut her off coldly, my tone not bothering to hide my sheer disgust. You're just here to drive a wedge between us. Well, I'm not interested. Wait, she panicked, pulling a manila envelope from her bag and handing it to me. Look at this first. I took it and opened it, as expected. A stack of photos, all intimate pictures of me and her from the past. Even a few steamy hotel photos. My face instantly dropped. What's the meaning of this? Silas Vane wanted me to give these to Serafina. Her voice finally sounded nervous. But I think we could cooperate, as long as you promise me one thing. I sneered, he's blackmailing you. She subconsciously twisted her fingers. He has dirt on me. If Serafina sees these photos, you guys are finished. So you want to use these photos to blackmail me? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Trixie, you don't understand me at all, and you understand Serafina Thorne even less. I pulled out my phone and dialed Serafina's number. Darling, you can come in now. A minute later, the room door was pushed open. Serafina walked in. Trixie's face went dead white in an instant, stumbling backward again and again. You guys were already... Serafina didn't even spare her a glance, just walked up to my side, a smile playing at the corners of her eyes. The photos aren't bad. The angles could be better, though. I laughed out loud and wrapped my arm around her waist. I was thinking the exact same thing. Trixie stood frozen on the spot, her face full of sheer disbelief. You guys, don't mind these? Mind what? Serafina raised an eyebrow. My husband's past? Or Silas Vane's pathetic little parlor tricks? I tossed the stack of photos back at her. Go back and tell Silas Vane, if he has any balls, he should come face me himself. Stop hiding behind women to play these underhanded, dirty tricks. Her face flushed bright red. Finally, she broke down crying. You guys don't understand. He'll destroy me. I owe him a lot of money. Serafina and I exchanged a look. I sighed, pulled out a business card from my wallet and handed it over. My father's contact info. He's a deputy chief prosecutor. If you are willing to cooperate and testify, he can help you get out of this. Her hands were shaking, but a sliver of hope appeared in her eyes. Are you telling the truth? Of course. Serafina's tone was dead serious. But the prerequisite is that you step forward and tell everything you know about Silas Vane. Trixie clutched the business card tightly and nodded. When we left the hotel, it was late at night. Neon lights reflected on the damp pavement, the reflections swaying. Serafina and I walked side by side. We didn't call a car. The street lights shone down on us, dragging our shadows out long. "Do you really not mind those photos?" I asked tentatively. She shot me a glance and said, "I do mind, but not because of you." I was stunned. "What I mind is that someone actually thought they could use such low-level methods to destroy our relationship," she said flatly. I couldn't help but laugh, grabbing her hand. "You know what? Sometimes I really doubt if you're even human. A normal person would be jealous," she replied softly. "Of course I get jealous, but compared to getting jealous, I trust that you standing right here right now more." My heart skipped a massive beat. I stopped walking. Under a streetlight, I turned to face her directly. "Serafina, no matter what happens, we face it together, okay? Promise me." She gazed at me, her eyes unwavering. Then she gently nodded. "I promise you." I gripped her hand tightly, and we continued walking toward the direction of home, our shadows overlapping on the ground, like a silent vow. The storm might come again at any moment. But in this second, I knew I would never face it alone ever again, because we were already one. The lights at the summit were blindingly bright. I stood backstage, peeking through the gap in the curtains at the audience below, a sea of dark heads. Over 500 business tycoons, government officials, and media reporters were seated neatly. Among them were quite a few of Silas Vane's allies, or rather, his protective umbrellas. I walked up behind Serafina, gently squeezing her shoulders. "Nervous?" She shook her head, but I still noticed her unconsciously adjusting her already flawless collar again. Today, she wore a deep navy suit, capable, understated, hair pinned up high, makeup cool and sharp, like a drawn sword. I leaned close to her ear, lowering my voice. "Just got a message from my dad. The police are all in position, just waiting for your signal." She nodded, took a deep breath. I knew she was also suppressing her racing heartbeat. Over these past 3 months, we had practically run ourselves into the ground day and night, investigating, gathering evidence, consulting lawyers. Step by step, we made it to today, and now, she was about to step onto this stage and use the gaze of the entire world to drag Silas Vane down from his pedestal. 5 minutes left. A backstage staff member came over to remind us. I suddenly grabbed her hand, turning her around to face me. She looked at me somewhat bewildered, but I stared right into her eyes, saying word by word, "Remember, no matter what happens, I am right there off stage." Her eyes trembled slightly. She reached up and touched the scar on my right brow, the one left behind when I stole Silas Vane's criminal evidence. Her fingers were as gentle as if trying to stop the bleeding for me. "I know," she whispered. Then she stood on her tiptoes and planted a tender kiss on my lips. On the other side of the stage, the host's voice rang out, resonant and powerful. "Next, please welcome the founder of Nova Tech, former CEO of Thorn Group, Miss Serafina Thorn, to bring us a keynote speech on business ethics and legal boundaries." Thunderous applause erupted. She looked at me once, her gaze resolute, then turned and walked onto the stage. I stood backstage, watching her perfectly straight silhouette step under the spotlight. The moment she appeared, the entire venue instantly fell silent. In the front row, Silas Vane sat dead center, impeccable suit, smiling like an old money gentleman. But I knew he was like an alert wolf, secretly hiding his fangs behind that smile. "Good afternoon, everyone." Serafina's voice came through the microphone, clear, firm. "Today, I'm not just going to talk about business innovation, but a story about greed, betrayal, and redemption." She clicked the remote presenter. The screen behind her flipped to the first slide, business ethics and legal boundaries. I saw the corner of Silas Vane's mouth stiffen. For the next 20 minutes, Serafina was like an impassive judge, using a calm tone, matched with the documents, bank records, and audio clips on the slides, exposing Silas Vane's entire chain of operations point by point. Stock manipulation, forged financial reports, money laundering, bribery, orchestrated bankruptcy. She even played Gideon Sneed's audio recording, that thug who used to do Silas Vane's dirty work. The complete confession he recorded after being brought in by the police. I had listened to that voice 100 times, and every single time it made my blood boil. The venue erupted. People gasped, people cursed out loud. Some were secretly recording on their phones. Silas Vane's face went from red to white, and finally to a sickly iron gray. He tried to stand up and leave the venue, only to find the exits had already been quietly blocked by plainclothes officers. Finally, Serafina's voice suddenly carried a hint of a choke. "What I want to talk about next is a 25-year-old unsolved mystery." A scanned image of a yellowed archive popped up on the screen. I couldn't be more familiar with it. It was the one my dad handed to me personally last night, 1998. My father, Arthur Thorne, was severely injured in a sudden attack. The suspect was his former business partner, Silas Vane. She paused for a second and continued. "The sole eyewitness was my mother, Evelyn Thorne, but right before preparing to testify in court, she suddenly passed away. The official conclusion was terminal stomach cancer." An uproar swept through the audience. "You are committing libel," the old fox finally cracked, jumping to his feet abruptly, his voice overpowering the loudspeakers. And right at this moment, in the audience, someone else slowly stood up. It was a white-haired elderly man, leaning on a cane, but his voice was still booming. "I can testify. Everything Miss Thorne said is the truth." My heart jolted. That was Professor Hawthorne, the forensic examiner who performed the autopsy on Serafina's mother back in the day. Professor Hawthorne stood tall, white hair flowing, but his voice was sonorous and forceful. Abnormal doses of arsenic compounds were detected in Evelyn Thorne's stomach samples. At the time, under intense pressure, the report was altered to say natural death from illness. But I kept the original records. Dead silence fell over the venue. I saw Silas Vane's face drain from pale white to deathly ash. That look in his eyes was like a rabid dog, glaring at Serafina with gnashed teeth. She gently held onto the podium. I knew she was suppressing her emotions. I practically sprinted up there, standing right beside her to block that malicious gaze, pressing against her lower back to gently comfort her. You did it. Applause exploded from the audience, wave after wave. I could feel it. That wasn't just applauding her courage. It was a collective sigh of relief for the arrival of the truth. The moment the summit ended, the media swarmed us like a tidal wave. Using a half-hugging, half-shielding posture, I basically dragged her into the private car arranged by my dad. The second the car door closed, she completely broke down and collapsed. I hugged her. Her hands were shaking, almost unable to speak. I patted her back gently, comforting her. It's all over. But she shook her head. This is just the beginning. Silas Vane has a whole chain of people behind him. So what? I squeezed her fingers. Right now they'll be too busy trying to save their own skins. They wouldn't dare touch you. Plus you have me, and my dad. Nobody dares touch you. She looked up, looking at me with complex eyes. In her eyes, I saw validation, and even a trace of reliance I could have never imagined before. The woman who used to protect me all the time was now leaving her back to me as well. Thank you, she said earnestly. I smiled. Between husband and wife, we don't say thank you. We returned to our new home, the house we bought using part of our first round of funding. Not flashy, but safe, comfortable, with enough space to start completely fresh. My dad was already waiting in the living room. When he saw us, he actually stood up and said to us, "Beautifully done." Just those 3 words. I practically broke down crying on the spot. Over 20 years, this was the first time he directly validated me. You were the one who found Professor Hawthorne? Serafina asked. Yes. My father nodded, looking at her and then at me. I found out there was an issue with the autopsy back then. It took some effort to convince him to step forward. He paused, then spoke again, his tone deeper than ever before. This matter also made me realize some justice arrives far too late, just like what I owe your mother. I froze instantly. I had waited too long for this sentence, but I didn't know how to respond. My throat was terribly hoarse. He waved his hand. That familiar strictness still hung on his face, but his expression was softer. Once Silas Vane's case is closed, I will reopen the investigation into your mother's disappearance case, no matter the result. Us father and son owe her closure. I nodded, nodding so hard, terrified I wouldn't be able to hold back my tears. Serafina quietly held my hand. The grip wasn't heavy, but it acted like an anchor, pulling me back from the storm of my memories. That night, we broke the rules and popped a bottle of champagne. Dad even drank a small glass. The perpetually tight lines on his face seemed to loosen up a bit. After seeing him off, Serafina and I curled up on the balcony, watching the city nightscape in a daze. The moment Professor Hawthorne stood up, she whispered, I felt like my mom could finally rest in peace. I hugged her, gently kissing the top of her hair. My dad too, 25 years. Today was the first time he mentioned my mom. She leaned on my shoulder and said, We are truly very lucky. In our darkest hour, we met each other. I didn't speak, just hugged her shoulder tighter and said, I'm the luckier one. If it weren't for you, I'd probably still be that muddling, useless piece of trash. Serafina lifted her head to look at me. Under the moonlight, I could feel the fiery intensity of her gaze. Her fingers landed between my brows, gently smoothing out a crease that had unknowingly furrowed there. She whispered, You have always been you. Only now, you've found a reason worth fighting for. I held her hand, dropping a kiss into her palm, saying softly, I have a lot of reasons, but you are the most important one. Time flew by. A year passed. Novatech, the company we built single-handedly, successfully went public on the stock exchange. Its market value was already double what the Thorne Group was back in the day. The IPO celebration banquet was held at the city's most luxurious hotel. Countless guests, glasses clinking. I wore a flawlessly tailored deep navy suit, mingling smoothly through the venue, surrounded by quite a few familiar faces and new money elites. And her, Serafina Thorne, wearing a wine-red evening gown, standing confidently and elegantly under the spotlight, laughing and chatting with the guests. She was like the core light source of this entire grand feast, making it impossible for me to look away for even a second. Next, please welcome the CEO of Novatech, Miss Serafina Thorne, to the stage for a speech. The host's voice interrupted my thoughts. She stepped onto the stage, the lights cascading over her, as if plating her in a layer of holy light. I raised my glass in a toast to her. She saw it and returned a smile. In that moment, I felt the only person in this entire venue worth looking at was her. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice clear and steady, like a sharp sword piercing straight into people's hearts. Novatech's success today could not happen without the team's hard work, and could not happen without your support. But today, I want to specially thank one person. I was stunned. My husband, Caspian Vance. Her voice echoed through the venue. In that instant, I froze, my heartbeat suddenly becoming incredibly fast. She continued, In my darkest hours, it was him who made me realize that business success is not the entirety of life. When I almost gave up, it was him who risked his life to protect the company's most valuable asset. When I was drowning in an obsession for revenge, it was him who reminded me to look forward. I never expected her to say these things on an occasion like this. The audience suddenly went completely silent. Many people looked at me with eyes full of approval. Some were even secretly wiping away tears. And as for me, my chest was burning. Even my breathing was trembling slightly. Therefore, she continued with a smile, I hereby announce, Novatech will establish a charitable foundation specifically dedicated to helping startup companies that have suffered from commercial fraud. And this foundation will be exclusively managed and operated by Caspian Vance. The moment the applause broke out, I was even a bit dazed. I had found my own worth, no longer just Serafina's husband, but a part of this stage, a part of Novatech. Back home, I still hadn't fully recovered from the emotions of earlier. Leaning on the sofa, I muttered, do you know how much work it takes to run a foundation? She kicked off her high heels, walked up to me, barefoot, like a fairy from a childhood stage play. Are you scared? I scooped her up in my arms, spinning her around in the living room. Are you kidding me? I'm too excited to even sleep. Finally get to prove I'm not just CEO Thorne's accessory. She lightly smacked me. Be careful, your ribs just healed. I carefully set her down, but still couldn't bear to let go. Serafina, did I ever tell you I love you? She wrinkled her nose and said, on average 3 times a day, over 1,000 times a year. Then hearing it one more time won't hurt. I stared into her eyes, my voice deep, hoarse, yet firm as I said, I love you, Serafina Thorne, not because you are a CEO, not because you can prop up a conglomerate, but because you are just you. Her eyes were a bit red, but her gaze was incredibly bright. She stroked my face, her voice carrying a slightly nasal tone as she replied, I love you too, Caspian. Thank you for never giving up on me. Even when I was at my most unlovable, I leaned down and kissed her. That kiss was very long, very peaceful, and very passionate. By the time the kiss ended, it was already getting light outside. The morning light spilled through the curtains into our quiet living room, like a soft halo covering everything. Oh right, she suddenly remembered something. My dad's old house is getting demolished next week. Do you want to go take a look? Of course, I nodded. I've never even been to the place you lived as a kid. It's just a very ordinary teacher's apartment. She smiled and said, the walls of my room still have the pop culture stickers I put up in middle school. I held her. The two of us curled up on the sofa, planning our weekend itinerary, discussing the company's next strategic moves.